Chapter 4797. Is this the legendary transformation talisman? Shenwu held the talisman in his hand excitedly and turned to look at Mo Lian. Seeing that Mo Lian had also applied the talisman to herself, Shenwu hurriedly followed suit. In just a moment, the four people's appearances had changed drastically. Mo Lian had turned into an ordinary middle-aged man. Everyone was stunned. She really didn't expect that a peerlessly handsome man with peerless talent would turn into an ordinary commoner after activating the transformation talisman. Shenwu had also turned into an ordinary-looking young man. There was an additional birthmark on his face, which made him look very different from his original handsome appearance. The worst one was probably the human snake. He simply could not believe it. He looked down at his bare body and fixed his gaze on that pair of small hands. The clothes that Shenwu had offered were now all piled up at his feet. He crawled out from the pile of clothes. His small body was about the size of a 5- or 6-year-old child. His black eyes were filled with embarrassment and indignation. He glared at Mo Lian and shouted angrily, What is going on? Don't shout. Hu Shichen hurriedly covered his mouth, a mischievous smile flashing across her eyes. Why do you always like to be naked? Hu Shichen coughed lightly and rummaged through her inner world. She took out a piece of girl's clothing and threw it to him. Make do with this. Isn't this a girl's clothing? The human snake was even more furious. His shouts were still suppressed by Hu Shichen's palm. Why are you shouting? Aren't we just making do with it for a while? When we enter the city and see a tailor shop, I'll buy you another one that fits you. Shenwu, brothers, this is the city of sin, where resources are scarce. There are no tailor shops, jewelry shops and the like, which are available in big cities, here. The human snake glared at them angrily. I'm not wearing it. Then you can be naked, Mo Lian said expressionlessly. As long as you're not afraid of being ugly, your father is also not afraid of being embarrassed. The human snake. This fellow's little face instantly flushed red. He pointed his little finger at Mo Lian and trembled. You. This guy actually dared to take advantage of this old man and claim to be his father. Mo Lian was still expressionless. She reached out and lifted the little body of the snake man. In order to prevent others from spying on you, from now on, your identity is my son. They are your uncles. Ma Shichen held back her laughter and finally swallowed it back into her stomach. The corner of Shenwu's mouth twitched. Seeing Snake Man's sullen and angry glare, he waved his hand repeatedly. You flatter me, you don't have to call me uncle. Be careful when an outsider comes to investigate. Shichen thought, Shenwu, this child. He's been corrupted by Prince Mo so quickly. Mo Lian said coldly, get used to your status. Call me father. Achoo. Arbor rubbed his little nose and put down the medical book in his hand. He subconsciously stroked his little belly and muttered to himself, if Jojo's lotus knew that he was going to be a father, I wonder how happy he would be. A few poison-tailed butterflies fluttered in through the window and landed in the palm of her hand. Still can't find it. Arbor sighed and raised a hand to stroke the butterfly's wings. But it was true. This place was vast and boundless. It was indeed very difficult for these poison-tailed butterflies that she kept in the storage talisman to find little Tai Sui. It was her fault for not being able to open the star domain. If she had more poison-tailed butterflies, she could track little Tai Sui in all directions. Chapter 4798. That day, after she and the little Tai Sui were blasted away by the sea's explosion, she was picked up by Aldous Chin, but the little Tai Sui was nowhere to be found. Although she didn't say anything, she secretly released the poison-tailed butterflies to search for it. Some things didn't need to be done by others, especially those from the Chin estate. Arbor didn't want to owe any of them a favor. Xiao Mu sighed. Although she was anxious, there was nothing she could do for the time being. Her divine sense wasn't stable, so she couldn't open her star domain. Even if she was anxious, she couldn't rush it. Hopefully, the soul-calming pill she took every day could help her recover as soon as possible. Laughter came from outside the door. Arbor was so noisy that she could only put down the medical book in her hand and put it away in her storage talisman. "Who's making so much noise over there?" A maidservant immediately walked over and bowed respectfully. "Today's weather is good. Miss, do you want to take a walk on the deck? Miss Yang, Sister Ping, and the others are fishing on the deck." Arbor expressionlessly said, "Oh." As soon as she heard that Moron Yang Fengyan was making a fuss on the deck with a few other women, she didn't want to go anywhere. She just wanted to lie down in the cabin for a while. However, Yang Fengyan, Ping, and the other women were too noisy. It was impossible for her to fall asleep. After lying on the bed for a while, Arbor was about to fall asleep in a daze when she heard a light knock on the door. The maidservant went to open the door and cautiously said, "Miss is asleep." The one who came to knock was an old mama. Hearing this, she was startled. "It's almost evening. Miss hasn't woken up from her afternoon nap. What's the matter?" Arbor's cold voice sounded. It was like jade beads rolling into a jade plate. The crisp tinkling sound made people's hearts tremble. The mama didn't dare to be impudent. She hurriedly said, "Miss Biao and Miss Ping invite you to the deck to get some fresh air." Arbor couldn't help but sneer in her heart. They're here to cause trouble again. It seems they really want to die. Lord Jojo had never been someone who was afraid of trouble. Just like the divine flower of the snow domain, if someone came to provoke her again and again, then don't blame her for directly crushing them to death. After washing up, a certain person chose a bright red battle suit and went out valiantly. He had made a lot of unique battle suits a while ago. The skirt was embroidered with black lotus flowers, and there were 2 small golden beads on the sleeves. The little stoic expressionlessly walked to the deck. A woman with a voluptuous figure walked up to her and gave her a hypocritical smile. She called out softly, "Crown Princess, you're finally willing to come out for a walk." Arbor gave her a significant look. The woman felt as if she was being stared at by something, and all the hair on her body stood on end. Why did it feel so strange? He felt that the Crown Princess at this moment was inexplicably very dangerous. Arbor's slightly cold eyes looked at the woman beside the railing not far away. Yang Fengyan and the 2 little maidservants beside her had their backs to him. Sure enough, Yang Fengyan was holding a fishing rod, and the 2 maidservants were giggling and jumping next to her. They said repeatedly, "Miss, you're so amazing. You've already caught your 3rd fish. Crown Princess, there's another fishing rod over there. Do you want to try it?" Ping asked with a grin. "Not interested." The little Crown Princess directly rejected Ping expressionlessly, causing the latter's bellyful of words to abruptly stop. Chapter 4799. This feeling was truly terrible. It was as if a fist landed on a ball of cotton. She couldn't find a place to exert force even if she wanted to. The little Crown Princess's lukewarm attitude made Miss Ping feel awkward, and she inexplicably found it difficult to continue the conversation. If Miss Ping interacted with the little stoic for a long time, she would certainly understand that this was the little Crown Princess's unique ability to kill conversations. The woman chuckled awkwardly and then said, "Then Crown Princess, just sit here for a while and enjoy the sea breeze. You can't stay cooped up in the room all the time. It's easy to get sick from boredom. Your whole family is sick." Arbor couldn't be bothered to pay attention to this chattering woman. With a glance, he sat down at the table with tea and snacks on the side of the deck. Ping Er walked up with a smile and sat down next to the little crown princess. Just as she was about to speak, she suddenly heard the little stoic ask coldly, "Who are you?" Everyone, the little crown princess was seriously too much. She had already stayed on this ship for several days, but she actually didn't even recognize Miss Ping Er, who was by the eldest young sir's side. Ping Er's expression also completely froze because of the crown princess's words. She finally found her voice after searching for a while. Miss Ping Er smiled even more awkwardly and said, "Crown Princess, you're a noble person with a forgetful memory. We've even met a few times in the Guqin Gardens when we were on Seacombe Planet." The young Crown Prince Consort looked her up and down. "Is that so?" If it weren't for the fact that Ping knew that the seemingly harmless little stoic in front of her actually had an extremely formidable and outstanding trait, she would have slapped her face. She really wanted to give this stoic a big slap across her face. "Who told you to look down on people and not recognize me? You'll get it later." Ping Er bit her lips awkwardly and said with a mocking laugh, "It's fine even if the crown princess doesn't remember. We'll be on the same ship in the future, so we'll be familiar with each other after talking more." "Who's on the same ship as you?" The little stoic harumphed and turned her head around, her gaze landing on Yang Fingyan's back. "You guys didn't invite me to sit on the deck because there's a big show for me to watch later, right?" Ping Er's heart skipped a beat, but she steadied her expression and didn't reveal any clues in front of the little stoic. She believed that she and Yang Fengyan had a tacit understanding of each other, so it was impossible for them to be exposed. It seemed that even though this little crown princess had been invited by them, she was still very wary of them. That sentence just now was actually to test her, wasn't it? Although she was young, she seemed to be extremely scheming. You couldn't see any emotion on her paralyzed face, so you couldn't get any information from her face. As Xiao Mu sat there, she leisurely twisted the white jade bracelet on her wrist. Suddenly, the sound of water splashing could be heard. The two maidservants beside Yang Fengyan jumped up and down in surprise. "Miss, it's here, it's here. It's another big fish." Yang Fengyan's back was facing Arbor, and the corners of her mouth secretly hooked up in a cold smile. Suddenly, she flicked her wrist and hooked the fishing line. A big fish that seemed to weigh about 10 catties was dragged out of the water by her. It created a splash in the air. The heavy fish was lifted up by the fishing rod and spun half a circle in the air. Then, the fish suddenly broke free from the fishing line and smashed down toward where Arbor was sitting. With Arbor's eyesight, he had already seen the big fish's true appearance when Yang Fengyan reeled in the line. A pair of dead fish eyes emitted an abnormal green light. Chapter 4800. The fish's mouth opened and closed, revealing 2 rows of ghastly fangs. This wasn't a normal fish at all, but a gigantic corpse fish. A cold glint flashed through Arbor's eyes, and he glanced at the gigantic corpse fish pouncing at him. Suddenly, his body flashed to the left. The speed of the teleportation talisman was so fast that it dazzled the eyes. Miss Ping simply didn't see clearly how the young crown princess moved. When she turned her head back, the crown princess was already standing at the cabin door. At the same time, that gigantic corpse fish landed next to her feet with a plop, opening its mouth to reveal 2 rows of saw-like fangs. Crunch! The big corpse fish bit the leg of the stool and immediately bit it into 2. Miss Ping jumped in fright and hastily retreated with small, quick steps. Her charming face instantly turned ghastly pale, and she let out a cry of alarm. Mississippi, upon seeing this, the 2 robust elderly nannies beside her hastily came forward to support her. However, that gigantic corpse fish suddenly leaped up and bit at one of the elderly nanny's leg. Crack! The corpse fish bit empty air, but the sound of the 2 rows of saw-like fangs snapping together made Miss Ping, and those 2 elderly nannies jump in fright. Sir Jojo stood on the side and coldly watched this farce in front of him, a faint luster flitting through his eyes. He met Yang Fengyan's eyes, who was standing next to the railing. Before Miss Yang could retract her mocking smile, she chillingly met the young crown princess's chilly gaze. She jumped in fright and hastily retreated a step. Her back bumped into the railing heavily. In this instant, she felt that the little stoic's gaze was incomparably deep and carried a chilling glint that made people tremble with fear. It made her heart pound like a drum, and her entire heart was suspended high up in the air, swaying up and down in a perturbed state. This feeling was truly ominous. Young Fengyan muttered in her heart and was about to quickly leave the deck. However, she heard the sound of splashing water again behind her. Young Fengyan looked back and saw a big carcass fish with half-rotten scales and bubbling mouth jumping up from the water. It jumped to the side of the railing and opened its mouth to bite her arm. Ah! The 2 little girls were so scared that they slipped and fell to the ground, dragging Young Fengyan down with them. Young Fengyan groaned and fell heavily to the ground. She was caught off guard and fell on her back. It was ugly and painful, and a trace of panic flashed in her eyes. She sat up as fast as she could and saw 2 big corpse fishes on the deck, one on the left and one on the right. They swam quickly on the deck and pounced on her, revealing their eerie white teeth. Young Fengyan hurriedly twisted the defensive spiritual artifact between her fingers. A shield instantly formed in front of her chest and back. At the same time, one of the big corpse fish had already bitten her back and was sent flying by the shield. Young Fengyan was scared witless, and her entire face was ghastly pale. She scrambled and crawled towards Miss Ping and the others. Ping was also almost scared silly. If it weren't for the nanny beside her fiercely pulling her, she would still be standing there foolishly. "Let's go, Miss Ping quickly returned to the cabin. Seeing that there were no less than 7 to 8 big corpse fishes that were over 1 meter long jumping up one after another, the old nanny knew that the situation had changed and was somewhat out of control. She hastily protected Miss Ping and ran towards the cabin first. Arbor looked at this scene with a spurious smile and turned to leave. Chapter 48:01. She then heard Yang Fengyan shout in exasperation behind her, "Stop right there. You! Is this your doing? Your methods are truly ruthless. Everything was fine before you came to the deck, but now, so many corpse fish suddenly jumped up." Ah! The 2 maidservants only knew some flowery martial arts, so they were already panicking when they saw a dozen large corpse fish jump up at once. Seeing that Miss Yang was still in the mood to leisurely bickering with the young crown princess, they hastily pulled her and shouted, "Miss, let's hide in the cabin first. It was better to let the 5th young master send people to clean up these corpse fish on the deck." Arbor originally didn't want to pay attention to her, but when he heard her chatter incessantly, he turned around and glanced at her. Soon after, he revealed a sly sneer at her. Better not smile, Young Fengyan thought. This smile was like using a knife to cut open a hole at the corner of her mouth, so I see that it was a bit frightening. Compared to when she wore a stoic face, it was even more frightening. "You will die." The little stoic's chilly voice drilled into her ears. Young Fengyan's heart felt like it had been stung by something, and she couldn't restrain her terror and started trembling. The dozen large corpse fish slid and leaped up, abruptly jumping forward. With a crunch, they bit down on a young maidservant's calf, causing her to immediately fall to the ground in pain and roll around. Young Fengyan was so frightened that her face was drained of color, and she retreated backwards repeatedly. She shook off the other young maidservant's hand and directly threw her into the school of corpse fish before fleeing backwards. That maidservant had an incredulous expression on her face, probably not expecting that she would be abandoned by her master so easily. She felt pain in her ankle, and she looked down in horror with widened eyes. She saw 2 to 3 large corpse fish biting the back of her foot, unwilling to let go no matter what. The 2 maidservants were rolling around on the deck. One of them hugged a large corpse fish that had pounced on her chest and tightly hugged the fish's head with a terrified expression. However, the big fish was unusually slippery, and it nimbly broke free from her hands and bit her face, causing her to scream in pain. Young Fengyan was so frightened by the scream that her chest was pounding. She ran to Ping Er and the others in a panic, pulling her and shouting, let's go quickly." At this time, Ping Er also did not want to stay on the deck any longer. Being pulled by Yang Fengyan, the 2 of them were so scared that their faces turned pale. It was as if they were stepping on a pile of cotton. Their legs were soft and their bodies were weak from fear. They stumbled left and right and crawled towards the cabin. Arbor's voice came from behind them. "Why are you running so fast?" As if possessed, Yang Fengyan glanced behind her and saw the little stoic standing eerily by the door. Her fingers suddenly twitched. A black light suddenly flashed in front of her eyes. When she opened her eyes again, she saw a fat corpse fish smashing towards her face. "Ah!" Ping Er hastily broke free from Yang Fengyan's hand and flung her away before falling backwards in a panic. The fat corpse fish abruptly leaped in front of Yang Fengyan, but Yang Fengyan stretched out both hands and firmly pressed down on the slippery fish body. It was too close. Yang Fengyan only saw black water gurgling out of the fish's mouth and dripping down. The dead fish's mouth opened and closed with a smacking sound, and the 2 rows of jagged fangs in its mouth made clanging sounds like steel thorns. Yang Fengyan was so scared that her face turned pale, and she opened her mouth to scream, "Ah!" Chapter 4802. That big, fat corpse fish faced her face just like that. The dead fish's mouth opened and closed in front of her, snapping and biting the air, scaring Yang Fengyan into letting out a series of shrieks. However, just as she let out that high-pitched shriek, her expression abruptly changed. A small corpse fish the size of a thumb suddenly darted out of the corpse fish's mouth and flew to her lips with a whoosh, biting her. What would it feel like to have lips with a small, sticky corpse fish? Yang Fengyan's mind instantly went blank, and even her breathing abruptly stopped. In this instant, the colorful world in her eyes completely lost its original color. It was as if the thing in front of her was only a black and white skeleton. Everything in the world lost its original color. The little stoic that appeared in her line of sight was leaning against the cabin door and staring at her with a cold and desolate gaze, as if she was looking at a corpse. She was that corpse. At this time, the little stoic's words seemed to jump out of her mind, "You will die." Yang Fengyan's pupils abruptly contracted, and she desperately grabbed that small corpse fish and fiercely flung it in Arbor's direction. However, before it could even approach her, that corpse fish was struck by a thunder fire that darted out from behind Arbor. With a whoosh, the small fish's body instantly disintegrated into pieces. Arbor's gaze chilled, and he involuntarily clenched his fists. He mechanically turned his head, and his small head moved inch by inch until his line of sight finally fell on the railing above the ship. A air transportation spiritual tool was currently docking and descending on the deck. Young Master Omega Kotoku jumped down from the spiritual tool with a cold expression. The thunder fire ignited on his fingertips and slithered across the deck, burning the shoals of corpse fish in his path to ashes. In just a flash, the corpse fish that were originally still alive and kicking on the deck were annihilated by him single-handedly. People continuously jumped down from the air transportation spiritual tool. Fatty Wintermelon, the tall and thin man Fei Zhuang, and the twin brothers Tang Quan and Tang Li. There was also Ling, that transvestite big shot who disguised himself as a woman and kept her in the dark when they first met. At this moment, he was dressed in white and was dressed like an elegant and charming young master. Eldest young Sir Chin also jumped onto the boat with his men. When this fellow saw Sir Jojo's lukewarm gaze, he rubbed his nose awkwardly. Damn liar. He had promised not to inform Omega Kotoku, but now Omega Kotoku was here. Eldest young master inexplicably read the words damn liar in Lord Xiao's eyes. A thought flashed through his mind, so he hurriedly shook his head and answered honestly, I swear, I really didn't inform second brother. When I went out to sea, I just happened to meet him. Eldest young Master Chin wanted to cry but had no tears. He thought to himself, the affairs of the world are impermanent. But judging from the little stoic's disdainful expression, she clearly didn't quite believe him. The little girl is here too. Dugu Ling called out happily. Arbor ignored him. Young Feng Yen, who had been greatly frightened, was now in a state of madness. She threw herself in front of eldest young master and second young master, sobbing. Eldest cousin, second cousin, save me. It's her, she's the one who harmed me. She summoned those large corpse fish to bite us. My two maidservants have already been killed by her. Young Fingyan's pupils contracted repeatedly as she pointed at the two maidservants who were lying on the ground, barely breathing. The two maidservants' limbs and faces were riddled with holes from the corpse fish's gnawing. From her angle, she just happened to see the whites of one of the maidservants' eyes. It was truly appalling. Chapter 4803. Young Feng Yan threw herself in front of the two young masters of the Qin estate and wailed, It's Arbor who harmed me. She was the one who attracted all these zombie fish. Kill her. Arbor couldn't be bothered to waste words with Yang Feng Yan and directly issued an order. A white light suddenly shot out from his wrist, and the little white snake transformed into a giant snake in the air. It swooped down and whipped at Yang Feng Yan's body. Don't whip her, she's about to turn into a zombie. Arbor knitted his brows and hastily reminded, Don't touch her, she stinks too much. The great void serpent's enormous body abruptly froze in midair, and then it whipped its tail at the railing next to it. Half of the railing leaped up and viciously smashed at Yang Feng Yan's head. Young Feng Yan immediately shrieked in horror and scrambled to crawl behind eldest young Sir Chin. However, before she could crawl behind eldest young Sir Chin, that half of the railing struck her head. That heavy and ferocious blow immediately smashed her to the ground. She fell forward onto the deck and spat out a mouthful of blood. The great void serpent retracted its enormous body and hissed at her, spitting out a dense black mist from its mouth. Everyone watched as that black mist revolved around Yang Feng Yan's body like numerous thin black snakes. Before long, that Yang Feng Yan was enveloped by the black power of the netherworld. Eldest young Sir Chin opened his mouth but swallowed back the words he wanted to say. On the other hand, young Sir Omega Kotoku didn't look too shocked. He merely swept an indifferent glance at Yang Feng Yan before retracting his gaze. What did she do? He understood this little stoic too well. She wouldn't slaughter people in a rage if they didn't provoke her into a corner. This young Feng Yan must have done something that crossed the little stoic's bottom line. She wanted to kill me, Arbor said coldly and left the deck without looking back. There was no need to wait for the result. Young Feng Yan, who was enveloped by the power of the netherworld, was doomed. Who knew what disgusting medicine this young Feng Yan used to actually gather a shoal of zombie fish over? It was called fishing, but in fact, he wanted to take advantage of the chaos to attack her. In the end, he suffered the consequences of his own actions. She didn't know if she had too much confidence in herself or underestimated Arbor. Arbor didn't come out for dinner. Instead, he casually ate some food in the cabin. When the Omega Kotoku arrived, Arbor couldn't help but frown. Even though this trip had the same goal as them, which was to head to the Pool Lotus sacred territory. But he really didn't want to be on the same side as the Qin Estates people. It looked like she had to think of a way to leave tomorrow. The little stoic reflexively stroked her belly. The dividing line of the venerable peach blossom immortal in the seabed abyss. When Duan Yu woke up with a start, the sky had already safely darkened. Inside the tent, the storm continued. A cold wind blew in from outside the tent, causing the candles to sway in the wind. "What time is it?" "It's almost midnight, Your Majesty." Xiao Kuzi hurriedly pulled the curtain of the tent closer and quickly walked forward. He reminded her softly, "There's still 2 hours left." However, Duan Yu didn't feel sleepy at all. He stared at the swaying candlelight with his obsidian peach blossom eyes as he pushed aside the brocade quilt and sat up. He had been feeling a bit vexed these past 2 days. The people he sent to the River of Forgetfulness to scout for information still hadn't returned, and he hadn't received any news until now. Hopefully, he was just overthinking things. "Let's get ready." Duan Yu pursed his lips and stood up after draping his clothes over himself. His long black hair hung loosely by his waist. Xiao Kezi nodded and lifted the tent curtain. Chapter 4804. A fierce gust of wind blew inside. Duan Yu's black hair fluttered in the wind, and his pitch-black eyes couldn't help but narrow for a moment. When the 3 armies assembled, it was already brightly lit outside. All the generals had finished their preparations and were waiting for the right time to set off to attack the city. They had been biding their time and sent people to infiltrate Yen City to get in touch with the defending generals. Since ancient times, Yen City had been an easy place to defend but difficult to attack. Even after being besieged by the Tianyun faction for so long, they still managed to defend their last line of defense. The Harpies couldn't enter the city to wreak havoc, but the Tianyun faction leader didn't seem to be in a hurry to besiege the city. He merely surrounded the city as if waiting for the citizens of Yen City to run out of ammunition and food before surrendering. Now that Yen City's defending army knew that His Majesty was outside the city and had secretly mobilized many troops, their hearts calmed down. At that time, they only needed to cooperate with His Majesty and coordinate with him from the inside. They didn't need to fear those bastards who couldn't kill the Tianyun faction. Begin the operation. 8th Young Master Qi led the troops forward and gave the order. A middle-aged general mounted his horse and saluted with cupped fists in Duan Yu's direction. Then he turned his horse around and led a group of light-armored cavalrymen to take a shortcut to the mountain behind Yen City. Duan Yu's gaze aloofly landed in the direction of the light-armored cavalrymen. Prepare 20 god stone cannons. Boom! When the god stone cannons fired at the harpies hovering in the air, most of the harpies were perched outside the city walls, waiting for orders from the higher-ups of the Tianyun faction. As soon as the cannon sounded, the soldiers inside the city walls in heavy armor and helmets popped out and pushed large catapults to bombard the harpies. Coupled with the power of the god stone cannons, huge rocks fell from the sky and smashed into many harpies, causing them to shriek and fall from the sky. From start to end, the Battle of Yen City only lasted half a night. The defending army in the city was truly infuriated by the Tianyun faction, so when they received news of His Majesty's personal arrival, they were all pumped up and extremely courageous. The cooperation of the two sides forced the Tianyun faction to abandon the city and flee. Unfortunately, a group of light cavalrymen entered the city first after receiving Duan Yu's order and headed straight for the underground water protection device. After opening the sluice gate, the river water was diverted to the channel outside the city. There was already a group of water spiritualists standing guard there, storing the water in the channels outside the city. Not long after, the underground protective device burst into flames and soared into the sky. The remaining harpies who couldn't escape in time were all shaken to the ground. Like moths, they pounced towards the blazing fire. Unfortunately, it was not because they liked the blazing fire, but because they could not control their bodies. They were sucked in by a powerful gravitational force, and their faces were distorted as they were dragged down. Duan Yu led the three armies into the city, stepping on the severed limbs of the harpies. The city guards opened the city gates to welcome them, leading a group of commoners to welcome them with tears in their eyes. For the past few days, they had been besieged in the city. It was indeed quite tragic. Those who survived were all covered in dust and grime at this time. Your Majesty. A rider passed through the crowd and quickly came over. Xiao Kuzi, who was following closely beside Duan Yu, quickly said, Yi, who you sent out, has returned. Duan Yu's expression abruptly changed after he took the secret letter from the hidden guard. Mo Lian and the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal fell into the abyss of the sacrificial sea. Jojo went missing. Chapter 4805. Crash. A set of fine porcelain on the table was swept to the ground by someone. Trash, you're all a bunch of trash. A middle-aged man with his back facing the crowd bellowed furiously before abruptly turning around. His face was masked with a cold glint in his eyes. There are so many of you, but you can't even take down a tiny yen city. Now, all your efforts have been for naught. The two team leaders nodded submissively before whispering, who knew that His Majesty the Emperor of Tsang Prefecture would actually come so quickly. They activated Yen City's underground defense system. We were also caught off guard, so no need to find excuses. The masked middle-aged man shouted angrily, it's because of you trash that you had to hand over the city you were about to obtain to someone else. The two team leaders didn't dare to retort after being berated so harshly. After the middle-aged man finished his torrent of abuse, one of the team leaders finally couldn't resist whispering, Vice Hall Master Ghost. Then what should we do now? Return to the headquarters or the masked middle-aged man they called Vice Hall Master Ghost harumphed. Do you still have the face to return? You haven't even finished your task, so where are you going to return to? The two team leaders hung their heads and slumped their shoulders, not daring to utter a word after being scolded. Vice Hall Master Ghost muttered to himself for a moment before saying, continue attacking Yen City. This stronghold is too important, so we must take it down. This place was surrounded by water, so the environment was rather independent. There were also defensive systems underground, making it easy to defend but hard to attack. If they could take this place and make it their Heavenly Fate Empire's first major stronghold in Tsang Prefecture presumably, things would develop even more smoothly in the future. Yen City was their first stronghold in Tsang Prefecture, so they had to take it no matter the price. Take down. Duan Yu repeatedly flipped through the letter. There were only a few words in the message, which only said that Mo Lian and the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal were sucked into the seabed abyss. Xiao Qiao disappeared in the river of forgetfulness's explosion. Where did the little fellow go? Duan Yu clutched the letter and paced back and forth in the room. Even though Xiao Kezi could tell that he was feeling uneasy, he did not dare to say much. He stood by the door like a log and bowed his head submissively. Go invite General Zhou over. Duan Yu paused and turned around to order. Yes. Just as Xiao Kezi was about to leave, he heard Duan Yu call out from behind him, wait, invite 8th young Sir Qi over as well. Yes. Xiao Kuzi hurriedly retreated. A short while later, the two of them were invited into Duan Yu house. They were currently staying in the Yen City garrison residence. The garrison lord naturally gave up the best room for His Majesty to stay in. However, even the most luxurious residence in the entire garrison manor was partially destroyed by the flames of war. Duan Yu's current location was actually the Lord Guard's study that he usually used. In the room, there was a brocade couch leaning against the window. When young Master Chiroe and General Zhou strode in, they saw His Majesty sitting on the brocade couch with a dignified expression and a pensive look. Duan Yu finally returned to his senses when he heard their footsteps. He nodded at them. The Heavenly Fate Empire definitely won't take this lying down after suffering such a huge loss. Duan Yu said coldly, they will definitely gather their firepower and make a comeback tonight. You must be fully prepared. Have everyone rest for 4 hours first. Chapter 4806. Begin guarding in the middle of the night. Duan Yu's expression was aloof as he said with certainty, we are guessing that they will infiltrate Yen City before dawn and attack us wantonly. 8th young Master Chi's expression turned grave. The city's garrison is fatigued after several days of continuous battles. It's very unsuitable for them to fight again. Duan Yu coldly said, tell them what's at stake. It's their own business whether they want to live or not. We brought less than 5,000 men. If the garrison can't make up for it in time, we will undoubtedly lose tonight's battle. 8th young Master Chi's expression turned even graver when he heard this. Your Majesty means that you are guessing that the people blessed by the heavens will definitely attack Yen City again tonight? But didn't they just lose a battle? Don't they need to rest and reorganize before? 8th young Master Chi paused and met Duan Yu's starry eyes. It suddenly occurred to him that the people blessed by the heavens probably didn't need to rest. Most of them weren't living beings, so why would they need to rest? Taking advantage of the fact that Yen City's garrison was at its most fatigued and lax, it was the best time to launch a sneak attack. We will stay until dawn and leave. Don't reveal our whereabouts to anyone for now. After we leave, carry out everything as usual. Watch over Yen City closely and don't allow any mistakes. Your Majesty is leaving Yen City. 8th young Master Chi and General Zhou exclaimed at the same time. Xiao Kezi also gaped in shock, his eyes intentionally glancing at the letter in Duan Yu's hand. Duan Yu wasn't here to ask for their opinion, so he merely glanced at them when he heard their exclamations. Remember. Under the pressure of his gaze, 8th young Master Chi and General Zhou could only cup their hands in acknowledgement. After walking out of His Majesty's residence, the uncouth General Zhou scratched his head and asked in confusion, 8th young Master, you are a smart person. Do you know where His Majesty is going? 8th young Master Chi looked at him speechlessly and shook his head. It's probably related to the letter His Majesty just received. There must be something urgent since His Majesty is leaving in such a hurry. 8th young Master Chi sighed. Since His Majesty has his own plans, we will just do as he says. All right. General Zhou nodded. I'll go find the Lord Garrison now. Xiao Kuibazik shuffled a few steps to the side of the brocade couch. He carefully opened his mouth and said, Your Majesty wants to return to the River of Forgetfulness. Today, when His Majesty received a letter from Wang Chuan, he felt uneasy and restless. Others might not know what had happened, but how could Xiao Kezi not know? His Majesty, although he was staying in Yen City, his heart had probably already flown to the River of Forgetfulness. Xiao Kuzi. Duan Yu looked at him seriously and said, half a month at the earliest and a month at the latest. If this matter is over, you can return to the capital with General Zhou and the others. At night, Vice Hall Master Ghost led a group of over 10,000 disciples of the Heavenly Fate sect. They were like a flock of black crows floating in the night sky. They looked down and saw that Yen City had already fallen into a deathly silence and darkness. Apart from the starlight, there was no light in the city. They are already sleeping. Vice Hall Master Gue smiled proudly. His eyes flickered with traces of gloominess. The humiliation he suffered at the hands of the Zhangzhou Emperor during the day could probably be repaid in one go. Chapter 4807. Vice Hall Master Gue could not conceal the excitement in his eyes as he gazed at the black and silent city below, the flames of exuberant interest dancing in his eyes. Very soon, this place would turn into a purgatory on earth. Prepare to attack. Vice Hall Master Gue growled and whispered to the harpies behind him who were lightly flapping their wings. This time, we can only succeed. Failure is not allowed. Yes. All the harpies readied themselves and lay dormant in midair, waiting for an opportunity to move. They were only waiting for Vice Hall Master Gue's raised hand to wantonly lower it. Then, they could swoop down and barge into the homes of the slums below to set fire and kill. Vice Hall Master Gue's heartbeat sped up, and his raised hand abruptly clenched into a fist. He could not conceal the smug expression on his face, and he was about to heavily swing his hand down. After a light whoosh, a streak of water spirit energy abruptly pierced through one of the harpies' shoulders, sending that harpies flying out of their suspended state. Vice Hall Master Gue's heart suddenly stopped, and he saw a large harpies fall out of the air like a sparrow hawk with its string cut. They crashed onto the ground with a bang, seemingly on the verge of death. This was not the worst situation. What was worse was that arrows shot over from all directions. Coupled with the sand, rocks, and soil, they attacked the large group of harpies under the effects of the catapults. Rumbling noises of tremors rang out incessantly. Vice Hall Master Gue did not expect that he would kick an iron plate when he originally wanted to pick up scraps. None of the people inside and outside Yen City were resting. They all sinisterly extinguished their lights and waited for them here. They were going to give them a good show when they arrived. Once the battle started, Yen City's garrison troops and the Tiger Cavalry would join hands and completely seal off the Destiny Sect's escape route. Vice Hall Master Gue gritted his teeth and could only lead everyone to jump down. He harshly yelled with reddened eyes, "Everyone, charge with me. Kill!" Two well-trained troops dashed out of the alley. When they saw Vice Hall Master Gue's group, they charged forward with their swords without another word. The 10,000 harpies that Vice Hall Master Gue brought were unable to gain any advantage under the siege of numerous spiritual cultivators. They could only lead the Destiny Sect's disciples into the depths of the alley, fighting as they retreated. Duan Yut stood at the top of the city gate tower and gazed coolly at the sky. Behind him stood Shao Kezi and a group of shadow guards. All of them looked at their emperor with reverence. His Majesty was really meticulous in his calculations. He could even calculate this accurately. As expected, His Majesty had anticipated the sneak attack of Tianyun's group. Now that they had made the first move, the disciples of the Heavenly Fortune sect were caught unprepared. Looking at the situation, they didn't even need to wait until dawn to subdue Tianyun, that dog. Vice Hall Master Gue, Vice Hall Master. One of the Tianyun group leader hurriedly holds onto Vice Hall Leader Gue's arm and says anxiously, "Let's quickly retreat. If we don't leave now, it will be too late." Behind them were thousands of fire spirit masters. They followed them all the way and burned with all their might. It was as if their spirit energy was free as it flowed out. If one looked carefully, one could see that these 1,000 fire spirit masters were split into 10 small teams and took turns. While the first echelon was tormenting them, the people in the later echelons were either taking medicine, resting, or recovering. Who would be able to withstand their style of fighting? It was simply wretched to the extreme. As Vice Hall Master Gue fought, he suddenly discovered that there were fewer and fewer people around him who could protect him. Chapter 4808. At first, there were more than 200 people fighting with him, but now, there were only 20 or so people circling around him. Not only were many of the harpies exterminated, but more than 90% of the disciples groomed by his organization were dead or injured. Ah! Vice Hall Master Gue's eyes were red as he let out a furious roar. Suddenly, a silvery white flame attacked him. If Vice Hall Master Gue hadn't dodged in time, he would have been burned to ashes. He watched as the small piece of wood that was bound by the flame was slowly being annihilated by that silver flame. For some reason, Vice Hall Master Gue's body inexplicably shuddered, and a sense of impending disaster descended in his heart. He looked up and saw a person standing across from him. He was naturally handsome and elegant. On that heavenly face, a pair of eyes seemed to be painted, revealing a few traces of cold light. Just like that, she silently looked at him. His gaze was too frightening, causing a trace of panic to rise in Vice Hall Master Gue's heart. Naturally, he recognized this man. After that, Song Prefecture's emperor rushed to Yen City. The person who turned the tide and reversed the situation was him. If he hadn't hurried over to intervene, Yen City would have been taken down long ago. Despicable little brat. A dark and cold glint flashed through Vice Hall Master Gue's eyes, and his fingers twitched as he stealthily took out a flying spirit dagger from his inner world. Die! This Vice Hall Master harshly shouted and controlled the flying dagger in his hand to swiftly slash at Duan Yu's neck without another word. This time, he had the intention of slicing open Duan Yu's neck and causing him to spurt blood on the spot. Several cold glints flitted through Duan Yu's peach blossom eyes, and he raised his hand to release a silvery white flame that tightly encircled the rapidly thrusting dagger. Vice Hall Master Gue discovered that the flame that Song Prefecture's emperor released was like obedient and mischievous little fish that tightly wound around his dagger, preventing it from advancing even half a step. He had a bad feeling in his heart. He turned around and didn't care about the others, fleeing with a whoosh. His speed was so fast that he had probably exerted all the strength he was born with. Unfortunately, even though he fled quickly, that Song Prefecture's emperor was even faster. In the blink of an eye, Duan Yu expressionlessly blocked his path. "Since you're here, stay," Duan Yu coldly stated. He raised his hand slightly and pulled out a silvery white long sword that was 3 feet long from a circle of flames revolving around his fingers. The flames burned fiercely and surrounded the silver white long sword. In an instant, it was as if a layer of mithril had covered the silver long sword, causing it to emit a resplendent light. Ghost Vice Hall Master had seen a lot of things, but he had never seen a silver white flame that was so brilliant that it was almost dazzling. When the flame landed on his body, Ghost Vice Hall Master did not feel any pain at first. It didn't seem to feel any burning pain. However, it made people's hearts tremble, and they were abnormally frightened. His hand was enveloped by the silver flames from the Demon Empyrean sword, followed by his arm, then his shoulder, head, and finally his entire body. He didn't feel any burning pain, but he was extremely flustered. It was as if he could smell the scent of death at this moment. No, Ghost Vice Hall Master danced in the circle of silver white flames. In the eyes of the other Heavenly Fate disciples, their Vice Hall Master's current appearance was simply a bit comical and laughable. His entire body was encircled by the silver white flames, and he was hopping and jumping there, howling on the verge of tears. Chapter 4809. Duan Yu coldly observed this Vice Hall Master ghost from the Providence Empire with a sneer on his lips. Disciples of the Providence Empire truly indulged in the wildest fantasies. They even wanted to occupy the entire Yen City and make it their stronghold. Where did they get the guts to act so rashly? Did they think that they didn't need to restrain themselves anymore because they were getting more powerful? Vice Hall Master Ghost had nowhere to hide as he was enveloped by the silvery white flames. These flames followed him like a shadow and burned silently. The silvery white light grew brighter and brighter. It completely lit up the night in this area. Vice Hall Master Ghost was like an exploding firework as his entire body emitted a powerful silvery white light. The disciples of the Providence Empire all gaped in fright and retreated several steps in unison. Just like that, the Vice Hall Master in front of them exploded into pieces right in front of them. Like fireworks, the pieces flew everywhere and then completely disappeared. The disciples of the Providence Empire couldn't regain their senses for a long time. A moment later, they scattered like birds and beasts while shrieking in terror. Seeing them scampering away like stray dogs, Duan Yu's lightning-like eyes flickered, and he icily spat out a few words. Obliterate them all. Leave none alive. At night, Miss Ping was startled awake by a nightmare. She hastily sat up and clutched the thin blanket as she panted heavily. In the dream just now, Yang Fingyan's face, which was shrouded in black mist, looked especially terrifying. She was startled awake by this nightmare, and her heart pounded heavily. Seeing that the sky was gradually brightening, Ping couldn't resist wanting to go out for a breather. She threw on a coat and hastily put on her clothes before opening the cabin door. However, she had just stepped out of the door when she saw an extremely fast and slender shadow flash across the ship's corridor. Ping hesitated for a moment before she couldn't resist quickening her steps and following after while holding her breath. Just now, she seemed to have caught a glimpse of Miss Chow flashing past. Miss Chow left the cabin so early. Ping suppressed a trace of suspicion in her eyes as she stealthily followed. Sure enough, she saw Arbor's figure. This was the aft of the ship's cabin. What was she doing here? Ping stuck to the side of the ship's wall, not daring to even breathe loudly. However, no matter how well she hid herself, she was still a person with an extremely low cultivation level. In truth, Arbor had already sensed Miss Ping the moment she walked out of the cabin door, but he was too lazy to pay attention to her. At this moment, seeing her hiding on the side of the ship, looking like she was spying on them, Arbor turned his head and cast a glance in her direction. His voice was indifferent as he said, "Since you're here, come over and say a few words." Ping jumped in fright, but she couldn't hide for even a moment. She knew that she couldn't escape, so she walked out from the corner and stood in front of Chiao Mu while trembling. She forced a smile at Arbor. "Crown Princess, why are you out so early?" The young Crown Princess glanced at Miss Ping expressionlessly. She scanned Ping Er's face from head to toe. She saw that the dark circles under her eyes were very thick. It seemed that he had not slept well. The corners of his lips could not help but curl up slightly as a trace of mockery flashed across his eyes. "What? Did you dream that Yang Fengyan came to take your life last night? That's why you didn't sleep well?" Ping jumped in fright and hurriedly took a step back. "Crown Princess, what are you saying?" Her voice was as weak as a mosquito's. "Why would I dream of Miss Yang? How could I? How could I?" Chapter 48:10. Let's not resort to insinuations in front of honest people, so don't pretend in front of me. Arbor impatiently waved her hand. "You want me to leave as soon as possible, don't you? Then that's fine. Get me a small boat, and I can leave immediately." Miss Ping, her small face instantly became stiff and pale. She repeatedly shook her head and said, "Crown Princess, how can you sneak away like this? Our eldest young master saved you. No matter what, you should have said goodbye to eldest young master before leaving." Arbor impatiently rolled her eyes. "Are you going to give me the boat or not? I already said stop pretending. Do you think I don't know? Yang Fengyan's brain, stupid. She's just someone who can be instigated. You were the one who instigated her to make trouble for me before. Yesterday's fishing incident was most likely also instigated by you. You're so kind, using an idiot to amuse me all day. All right, hurry up and give me the boat. I'll leave immediately." Miss Ping's face was filled with fear and confusion. She vigilantly swept a glance over Arbor and immediately retreated a few steps, putting some distance between them. Seeing this, Arbor slowly approached. Her pitch-black eyes were filled with a trace of mockery. "Don't worry, I won't make trouble for you for now." Arbor coldly swept a glance over her. Miss Ping's lips trembled, but in the end, she was unable to ask the question at the bottom of her heart. Arbor knew what she wanted to ask. She wanted to ask why she still wanted to make an example out of Yang Fengyan even though she already knew that she wasn't the mastermind. Arbor naturally wouldn't tell her that although Yang Fengyan had only been fooled by someone and became this Miss Ping's weapon, but she truly did want to kill her. If she continued to stay, it would be a great disaster. What do you want?" Miss Ping's lips trembled as she asked in a low voice. If the eldest young master knew that she was the mastermind behind the assassination of the young crown princess, he definitely wouldn't let her off so easily. Miss Ping felt a trace of eerie coldness from the bottom of her heart, and her body couldn't help but tremble. "I already said I want a boat. Come with me." Ping bit her lip hard and took out a sealing ball from her sleeve. She seemed to have made up her mind to bring the little crown princess to the stern of the ship. "Crown Princess Consort, if I give you this boat, will you be able to write off everything that happened before?" Arbor looked at her deeply. Just as he was about to speak, he heard a giggling voice behind them. "How can that be? You want to clear the slate with this broken ship? How can there be such a good thing in the world? This little stoic doesn't look like such a good-natured person." Arbor frowned slightly. Miss Ping, who was standing beside her, couldn't help but tremble when she heard the person's voice. Ping's body swayed, and she almost lost her balance. Arbor turned around to take a look and saw that guy Duguling walking over with a grin. His peacock green clothes complemented his handsome face, making him look radiant. Arbor couldn't help but want to ridicule this person's taste in clothes. Seeing such a big lump of green running toward her with a grin so early in the morning, it really spoiled her appetite. It was probably because the little girl's complexion looked very unsightly. Duguling stopped and lowered his head to look at his sleeve. He even sniffed it considerately. There didn't seem to be anything wrong with his body. Chapter 48:11. She didn't emit any strange smell from head to toe either. He really didn't know why the little girl had such a sour expression, as if she didn't want to see him at all. Arbor glanced around, and sure enough, he saw young Sir Omega Kotoku following behind Duguling. Behind him was a short and stout wintermelon wielding the purple gold hammer. Seeing her look at them, the short and stout wintermelon even grinned at Arbor very honestly. Arbor expressionlessly glanced at them before immediately retracting his gaze. Chi Nexian's icy gaze landed on the item in Ping's hand. Inside a round sealing bead, a small boat could be seen drifting with the waves. If the crimson firmament wave hadn't been sucked into the star domain, it wouldn't have been so troublesome right now. Originally, the crimson firmament wave had also been sealed inside the sealing bead. However, because it had been highly utilized recently, Arbor couldn't be bothered to seal it again after using it last time, so he conveniently stored it inside the star domain. When the little stoic thought of this, she couldn't help but sigh. If she could use the crimson firmament wave, she probably would have fled at top speed 2 days ago. Now that she wanted to flee, she was actually caught red-handed by Omega Kotoku. It was truly awkward. "Take her away." Young Sir Omega Kotoku ordered icily, and 2 black-clothed guards immediately flashed out from behind him. They took a few steps forward and walked towards Miss Ping, whose face was filled with terror. It was as if Ping's body was gripped by immense terror, and she reflexively grabbed Xiao Mu's hand. She wailed miserably, "Crown Prince Consort. Please help me, plead for leniency." She didn't want to die yet. She didn't want to die in this kind of ghastly place. She was too familiar with the second young sir's methods. When he coldly said, "Take her away," her future fate and path were sealed. Chin Axian coldly curled her lips at her. Her sharp gaze landed on Ping, as if she was wondering why she was so daring. "Crown Princess, help me, Crown Princess." Miss Ping cried and knelt down in front of the young Crown Princess. She reached out and hugged her leg, crying loudly. "Crown Prince Consort, I was in the wrong before. Please help me on account that we are both women." Arbor looked down at her and then looked at Omega Kotoku warily. "What do you want?" Speaking of which, she was also very familiar with second young Master Chin. But just now, Xiao Mu discovered that she was unable to discern any emotion from second young Master Chin's face that was as dry as a dry well. "As a lowly servant, she doesn't know her place," Omega Kotoku said coldly. "What's the point of keeping her? Naturally, it's to let her go to a good place." Putting aside the fact that she always stirred up trouble, she even had the audacity to want to send the little stoic away. Young Sir Omega Kotoku's fingers reflexively tightened. He seemed to have overlapped the Miss Ping, in front of him with Shi Yongqian, the woman who was like a nightmare in his previous life. He saw Ping's face as Shi Yongqian's. He raised his hand, and two black-clothed royal guards forcefully dragged the wailing Ping back. Ping was so scared that her face was drained of color, and her entire body trembled uncontrollably. She reached out and hugged Arbor's leg as if she had grabbed onto a life-saving straw. She hugged it tightly and didn't let go. She screamed in terror, Crown Princess, help, Crown Princess, Crown Princess." The young Crown Princess truly didn't like this woman. How could she have a good impression of a woman who secretly hid in the dark and caused trouble for her and instigated Yang Fengyan to find trouble with her? Chapter 48:12. Moreover, this woman was so comical and laughable. Speaking of which, she should have met this Miss Ping, in Sikong Planet's Qin estate. From beginning to end, she didn't have much interaction with her. She also didn't know where this Ping's great hostility came from, to actually incite Yang Fengyan to deal with her time and time again. Now, this Miss Ping treated her as a life-saving straw and refused to let go no matter what. The little Crown Princess inexplicably felt that she was simply crazy. When she was useful, she hugged her and cried for help. When she was useless, she wished for nothing more than to tear her apart. This woman truly was extremely capricious. How could there be such a bizarre logic in this world? Arbor simply kicked that wailing woman flying with a kick. Her aloof face didn't have much expression, and she said indifferently, "Shut up." Her head hurt from crying. Why were these women so loathsome? They only knew how to wail when they encountered something and couldn't think of a way to resolve it themselves. The little Crown Princess turned to look at Sir Omega Kotoku with a frosty expression. "Can't you speak properly?" This Omega Kotoku was becoming more and more abnormally savage. Every time she came up, if she wasn't shouting to beat him up, she was shouting to kill him. How annoying! Sir Omega Kotoku was taken aback, and his eyes suddenly lit up. "You're talking to me?" Dugaling. He suddenly felt that his young master was a bit silly. Wasn't this the obvious truth? If the little stoic wasn't talking to you, who else could she be talking to? Could it be that she was shouting at the air? Arbor was also a bit speechless. She glanced at him and tried her best to be patient as she said in a very gentle tone, "I want to leave this place as soon as possible to handle some personal matters, so I need a ship." Sir Omega Kotoku hastily persuaded, "I heard from elder brother that you were injured. Your divine sense isn't stable yet, so you shouldn't go out to do things. If you have something you need to do or someone you need to find, just instruct the servants to do it as much as possible." Arbor grumpily glared at him. I'm going to handle my personal matters. I don't like to rely on others. With a cold expression, she added, I like to do it myself. It's good to do it personally, it's good to do it personally. Duge Ling happily ran forward and said with a smile, how about this, we'll go with you. I heard that you are looking for the missing young miss of the forgotten Chuan Dragon clan. We have more people, so it'll be easier for us to get things done. Arbor looked at him expressionlessly. I'm not looking for her. I have nothing to do with the Wang Chuan Dragon clan anymore. Whether Long Shangyun lived or died, it no longer mattered the moment the two of them turned around. Having eldest Qin send people out to search for her for so many days, it could be considered her final act of goodwill. Since this was the will of the heavens, there was no need for her to force it. After all, the most important thing for her now was to wait for Jojo's lotus and find the whereabouts of the little Tai Sui. As for the others, Jojo was exhausted. She couldn't care less anymore. Duge Ling blinked, then do you sell beautifying pills? Arbor. Sir Omega Kotoku, what was going on? Weren't they seriously discussing matters earlier? Why did this Duge Ling suddenly bring up the beautifying pill? Ever since I tried the beautifying pill for 3 days, I've been wanting to buy a permanent one from you. Duge Ling's eyes gleamed as he stared at her. Can I? The little stoic pursed her lips and glanced at him coolly. I can, but I'm afraid you won't be able to afford the price. Chapter 48:13. Duge Ling's mouth twitched, and he hurriedly said, didn't we agree on it back then? After 3 days of trial, we'll buy permanent beautifying pills for 2 million per pill. That was the price back then. Arbor coldly glanced at him. The price has increased now. Duge Ling's mouth twitched, and he carefully asked, Xiao Qiao, how much is it now? 10 million per pill. Damn, why don't you go rob a bank? Duge Ling was dumbfounded, and he couldn't say anything. Instead, the short wintermelon holding the purple gold hammer couldn't help but shout. Arbor expressionlessly glanced at them. It's the market price. Now, the entire capital knows that Jojo's beautifying pills are of good quality and quantity. 1 pill is guaranteed for 100 years. So many people are fighting to buy it, and the price has already risen to 8 million. Duge Ling, then why do I have to add another 2 million? The little crown princess glanced at him and said impatiently, I only sell 2 beautifying pills every month. It's up to you whether you want it or not. What's wrong with giving you a back door and adding 2 million as a threshold fee? You're getting a bargain. Duge Ling, yes, yes. This fellow nodded repeatedly, and he hurriedly took out money from his pocket with a grin. I have 20 million here. Give me 2. Arbor's face was expressionless as she reached out to take the spirit coin card that he offered. She nodded, took out a porcelain bottle, and tossed it to him. 1 pill can beautify for a long time. Duge Ling cheerfully nodded. I still have at least 200 years to go. I think I can live for a long time. To prevent you from raising the price 100 years later, he'd better buy 1 more beforehand. Arbor glanced at him and nodded. You're smart. Duge Ling, so you're really planning to raise the price 100 years later. Alright, I've chatted with you guys for too long. Arbor turned around and walked to the deck. Omega Kotoku's figure flashed, and he was already beside her. Your body hasn't recovered yet. Don't mess around. Arbor dodged his hand and glared at him. You're still saying you're not putting me under house arrest? Of course not. Eldest young Master Qin's voice entered everyone's ears. When Qiao Mu looked back, she saw Qin Xian, this guy, directing people to carry something over. Arbor looked at the stretcher. When they got closer, they could see clearly that there was a person lying on the stretcher, wrapped in bandages from head to toe. The little fellow's expression did not change at all, but his heart was beating wildly. Don't be nervous, Jojo. Eldest young Sir Qin glanced at her with a smile. It's not Long Shangyun. Who's nervous? The little stoic stubbornly defended herself. Who is this? You know him, eldest young Master Qin said with a smile. That Prophet Tuesday. This is probably what it means to plant flowers but not bloom, but to plant a willow unintentionally, the willow grows. Eldest young Master Qin said briskly, Look, we couldn't find Long Shangyun after so long, but we found this prophet too instead. What do I need to find her for? Arbor asked coldly, his gaze sweeping over that bandage without any warmth. Prophet too probably heard her voice, and his entire body struggled a few times in agitation. However, his injuries were too severe, and his entire body was wrapped in bandages. Blood seeped out from between the bandages when he moved slightly. Arbor curled his lips mockingly and sneered, Prophet. Have you ever divined that your future self would become like this? Chapter 48:14. Tu Xianji seemed to be very agitated and kept trying to straighten her body. However, her entire body was wrapped in those white bandages until she resembled a salted fish. She couldn't even turn around, let alone sit up. This was simply wishful thinking. Arbor truly didn't expect that eldest young Sir Qin would even find Tu Xianji. Since the sun had just risen, in other words, this prophet should have been found last night. What did you interrogate her about? The little stoic looked up and stared sharply at Qin Xian. The latter smiled helplessly at her. Why is a child so smart? Seeing that she was about to turn hostile, the eldest young sir hastily said, I didn't interrogate her about anything. I just wanted to know the whereabouts of the 5 keys. Without waiting for the little girl to frown and ask, eldest young Sir Qin answered obediently, the Pond Lotus Sacred Realm is guarded by the River of Forgetfulness's 5 patrician families. Each patrician family holds a key, and only with these 5 keys can the passage leading to the depths of the Pond Lotus Sacred Realm be opened. Long Wan said before that the Pond Lotus Sacred Realm automatically sealed itself off a year ago. Even if you obtain these so-called keys and open the passage, you won't be able to enter the Pond Lotus Sacred Realm's entrance. Qin Xian shrugged with a smile. Let's try. How will we know if we don't try? A faint glint flickered in the depths of his pitch-black eyes. Arbor stood by the railing at the stern of the ship. Looking from this direction, she only felt that his pitch-black eyes were bottomless. Thump, thump, thump. Tu Xianji agitatedly knocked on the wooden stretcher. Under eldest young Sir Qin's signal with his eyes, 2 servants reached out to help Tu Xianji up from the stretcher. Arbor reluctantly glanced at her and clearly saw her current appearance. Her entire face was buried under the bandages, and she was currently glaring fixedly at her with a pair of cold and venomous eyes. An extremely feeble voice came out of her mouth. Arbor carefully discerned that this old woman, Tu Xianji, seemed to be calling her Mu Qiao. Hence, her eyes icily gazed over, and her aura also turned chilly. Tu Xianji arched his back as if he wanted to say something to her. The sound of something breaking rang in Arbor's ears. It took her a long time to piece together some useful information from the few words that she had said. Prophet Tu was probably saying Shui Yuan's prediction was good. The Forgotten River Dragon clan that had lost the 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl would eventually be drowned in the torrent of history as time passed. Without the shark pearl, the Forgotten River Dragon clan had perished. However, it was too strenuous for her to speak. She spoke intermittently for a long time and was unable to complete a sentence. However, Arbor was already impatient to listen to her nonsense. He coldly glanced at Tu Xianji and rejected her self-righteousness with a single sentence. You're wrong. The Wanchuan dragon clan didn't perish because they lost the shark pearl. It was because you sought your own death. She didn't want to waste any more words with this old woman. From the looks of it, although eldest Qin and Omega Kotoku hadn't put her under house arrest, they wouldn't let her leave the ship so easily. She had to think of another way to escape. Arbor's eyes darted around before she suddenly turned to Duguling and said, "How about we have a competition?" Duguling's head instantly shook like a rattledrum. "No competition, no competition. You're trying to trick me again. You want me to slap you so that you can seize the opportunity to escape." Arbor harumphed and abruptly turned her head away. She naturally wanted to find a ship to leave so that she could wait for Jojo's lotus at the bottom of the sea. Chapter 48:15. Otherwise, she could just enter the water and leave. With her speed in the water, even if the entire boat sped up, it probably wouldn't be able to keep up with her. However, they had the advantage in numbers right now, while she was alone. She only had Ming Ming by her side, so it was best to be careful. After all, she still had to stay in the Sea of Forgetfulness for a while. Even if she ran away now, she still had to guard the entrance to the undersea abyss. As long as eldest Qin and the rest followed this direction, it was useless to run. They could still find her. It was best not to fall out with them for the time being. The little fellow's eyes turned, and she turned around to yawn. Time to sleep. She suddenly stopped in her tracks, and looked around in confusion. Where was that Miss Ping Er who was sobbing just now? She didn't even notice when she was dragged down. Thump, thump, thump. Tu Xianji knocked hard on the wooden stretcher beneath him, his old eyes revealing a furious glint. Mu Qiao. Tu Xianji's lips trembled under the bandages, and he spat out a sentence with great difficulty. En shun ti take you back to forgetfulness. Arbor narrowed her eyes, turned to look at her, and let out a cold laugh. Unfortunately, there's no medicine for regret in this world. Mu Qiao. Tu Xianji clenched his bandaged fists. Mu Qiao. Arbor had already reached the top of the stairs. She turned around again, and a pair of eyes filled with boundless coldness stared deeply at Tu Xianji. My surname is Qiao. Once surnamed Xiao, forever surnamed Xiao. She wouldn't change this surname. 10,000-year-old shark pearl. Arbor hooked her lips expressionlessly. I'll kindly accept it. After saying this, she didn't look at Tu Xianji again, and turned to head upstairs. Duguling blinked, looking at his young master, and then at the old woman who was sitting on the stretcher and knocking on it. What should we do about this? Qin Xian's eyes flashed. Throw her down. Throw her down. Duguling blanked, and then stammered, throw her where? Young Master Omega Kotoku glanced at him like he was an idiot, and then turned to leave without a word. You're usually so smart, how come you can't even understand young Master's words today? The fat man on the side laughed strangely and hung the purple golden hammer on his waist. He laughed in a hoarse voice, where should I throw it? Throw it into the water, of course. He loved to throw people into the water. Especially now that the water was filled with all kinds of aggressive small creatures. He just didn't know if the old woman, who was wrapped in bandages, could survive in the water for a while. Tu Xianji let out a roar from his throat. He panted with all his might, and his eyes were filled with fear. Clearly, Tu Xianji had heard their conversation clearly. She watched helplessly as two servants lifted her up on the stretcher and strode towards the railing. Tu Xianji's eyes finally revealed a trace of fear. She knew how to calculate and was proficient in all kinds of fortune-telling techniques. However, he really did not predict that he would lose his life in this vast and boundless sea of forgetfulness today. With a splash, the water splashed. Arbor pushed open the window, propped up his chin with one hand, and looked into the distance. On the wide sea, Tu Xianji's bandages were all destroyed as soon as he entered the water. The bandages floated on the surface of the water, unraveling one by one. When the hideous wound under the bandages was exposed, Tu Xianji's heart skipped a beat. She turned around and saw a thumb-long sea snake slithering out and biting her wound. Chapter 48:16. At the same time, a dozen or so tiny sea snakes burrowed out from the water. More and more alien creatures were attracted by the fresh blood that was spreading around the prophet. They crowded around each other and surged towards the prophet. Tu Xianji let out a hoarse and gloomy hiss in the water in fright. Her pair of dim old eyes contained a bit of terrifying hatred as she looked in the direction of the large ship. To think that she, the extremely revered great prophet of the dragon clan of Forgotten River, would end up like this. Arbor didn't want to continue watching. She closed the window with one hand and stood silently for a while before turning around and pattering to the bedside. She had just sat down when she heard the fatty's hoarse voice from outside the door. "You mean, that old woman wrapped in bandages just now was actually some prophet of the dragon clan of Forgotten River?" Faint laughter came from beside her. The fatty laughed out loud. "She's so good at foretelling. Could it be that she didn't calculate that she would die today?" Knock knock. The little stoic sat on the edge of the bed and looked up at the cabin door. The plain-colored window was very clear, and she could see several figures moving about inside. "Little Chiao, come out and eat breakfast." Sir Jojo was disgruntled. "I don't have an appetite. I can't eat." "Don't." Duguling knocked on the door again and said with a grin, "There are all kinds of snacks that you like to eat. Stop pretending. We all know your lousy habits. 3 meals a day, no less." Arbor pulled open the cabin door with a taut face and glanced at the beaming Duguling outside. Her gaze landed on his face. She seemed to see this person sitting on a small stool with a grin and asking her, "You're so young. You don't really want to die, right? People must have the will to live in order to have a future and hope." The little stoic expressionlessly walked past him. Our dear Duguling reflexively touched his face. Strange. Why did he have a misconception that when the little stoic looked at him just now, her gaze was distant, as if she was looking at him through a hazy veil? Stoic. Duguling chased after her with a chuckle. "Do you want to eat shrimp dumplings? Do you like green bean porridge or red bean porridge?" During breakfast, the little stoic was too lazy to speak. No matter who spoke to her, she would completely ignore them. There was a low pressure on the deck. The row of maids standing at the side were all trembling in fear. When they saw her, it was as if they had seen a scourge or a ferocious beast. They all distanced themselves from her. It was as if he would have a bad ending if he touched her. Arbor couldn't be bothered to pay attention to the crowd. After eating, he made an excuse to catch up on sleep and slipped away. He returned to the cabin and closed the door. The little stoic then took out a storage talisman and a handful of thunder fireballs, placing them neatly on the table. Her small hands gently moved them, causing them to make rolling sounds. "Your Majesty." Lil Ku-zi hurriedly ran in. At a glance, he saw His Majesty standing by the table, holding a brush and writing something. He was dressed in a sapphire blue robe, and there were a few ink bamboos on his sleeves. Her fine black hair was scattered behind her, her thin lips were slightly pursed, and her eyes were focused on the book. She stood there like a pine tree. Truly, the young master was sculpted and polished, elegant and natural. Lil Ku-zi was most afraid that he would leave without a word. Now that he saw that he was still in the study, his heart couldn't help but relax. "Personally hand this letter to 8th Chi, Duan, you said." "Yes." Lil Kuzi hastily took the letter and nodded solemnly. Chapter 48:17. Immediately after, he recalled the purpose of his hasty visit and hastily reported, "Your Majesty, the kingdom of Duo Luo of the Grasslands has sent an envoy team here to meet your Majesty." Duan Yu was taken aback. "Now?" Xiao Kezi quickly nodded. "The kingdom of Duo Luo." Duan Yu frowned slightly. He searched through his memories, but he could not recall where this kingdom of Duo Luo came from. "Your Majesty, the 8th young master has already led people to contact them, but the leader of their envoy team keeps saying that he wants to meet your Majesty." Duan Yu was rather impatient. "I don't have time." How could he be in the mood to meet this and that and those miscellaneous people? Right now, his heart had already flown to the river of forgetfulness and was thinking of meeting up with the little girl. Even now, the first-hand information he had still did not reveal the little girl's whereabouts. How could he not be worried? What exactly happened to Mo Lien, that idiot? "Your Majesty, your Majesty." A young eunuch rushed over in a flurry and almost tripped over the protruding door sill. He staggered and stumbled forward a few steps. Xiao Kezi involuntarily creased his brows and chided, "What are you in such a hurry for? How dare you be so unruly in front of His Majesty?" Duan Yu looked up and glanced at him dryly. "What happened?" The young eunuch hastily knelt in salute and stammered, "Reporting to your Majesty, Miss Wu has started fighting with the envoy team." The 8th young master ordered this servant to quickly report. Duan Yu pressed his throbbing temples. "Xiao Kezi, go settle this matter." Xiao Kezi quickly nodded. He knew that His Majesty could not wait a second longer and had to set off now. Other people did not know what that letter was. How could Xiao Kezi not know? His Majesty longed for the river of forgetfulness, not because of how beautiful and attractive the sea of forgetfulness was, but because there was someone in the river of forgetfulness that attracted his heart, causing him to yearn for that person uncontrollably. Duan Yu left without consulting Chestnut and did not have time to speak to him. Just as he heard a commotion outside the door approaching from afar. 2 figures, one red and one black, dashed through the door and began to fight in the courtyard of the garrison mansion. As the spiritual power surged, 2 graceful figures could be seen, as if they were passing through flowers and trees, circling around people and hands in the courtyard. Red and blue light would occasionally pass through, and the light was faintly discernible. Wu Ruame was wearing a scarlet-red short-sleeved gown. She shouted, "Don't run," and chased after him. She raised her sword and slashed at him. The black-clothed woman on the other side had a black veil covering her face, revealing only a pair of sharp almond eyes. When she reached out to receive the attack, she turned around and saw Duan Yu and Chestnut standing nearby. There was no expression on Chestnut's furry face. His pair of round black eyes silently stared at the 2 women who were fighting. "Your Majesty the Emperor of Tsang Prefecture. Is this how you treat your guests?" A few strangers ran over from the corridor that connected the atrium to the garden. The person running at the front couldn't help but gasp for breath. It seemed that he was in a hurry. Duan Yu's icy gaze swept over those people. Xiao Kezi quickly went up and reported in a low voice, "These people are from the envoy group of the kingdom of Duoluo of the Prairie." Duan Yu's sharp gaze stared at the envoy who spoke, then shifted to Miss Wu. Still not stopping. Xiao Kezi shouted in exasperation. He angrily said, simply impudent to the extreme. How dare they disregard their dignity and fight each other in front of His Majesty? Arrest them all. Chapter 48:18. As soon as he finished speaking, several figures walked up and lifted Miss Wu up like grabbing a little chick. They separated the black-clothed woman who was fighting with her and restrained both of them. Even though Wu Ruome's arm was grabbed, she couldn't resist kicking at the black-clothed young lady from afar. She couldn't resist cursing, "No wonder you had to cover your face. Who are you trying to disgust with a fake face? You should cover your face, and it's best if you don't take off your black veil. Otherwise, I'll beat you up every time I see you." Xiao Kezi's face was dark, but he was rather curious. Although this Wu Qianjin from the Prime Minister's family wasn't very reliable most of the time, she came from a noble family after all, so her basic self-restraint and etiquette were absolutely indisputable. But now, Xiao Kezi couldn't help feeling curious, and his gaze probingly swept towards the veil on the black-clothed young lady's face. What did a fake face mean? The black-clothed young lady couldn't help but sneer. "What does it have to do with you? I think you're just jealous." Wu Ruame couldn't help but laugh in exasperation. "I'm jealous of your fake face. You're really thick-skinned, daring to say anything." Duan Yu's gaze was chilly as he looked at the several people from the kingdom of Luo's envoy group who were briskly walking over. A small kingdom that could barely be found on the map of the 3 provinces came to find him so openly, saying that they had something to discuss with him in person. And they didn't even accept 8th young Sir Chi's invitation. Ha! Who on earth gave them the confidence to come here and shout like this? They said they wanted to discuss with him, Duan Yu. And he had to accompany them to the end. What the heck? This whatever kingdom of Luo was originally developed from a small tribe on the prairie. A while ago, he used a grand banner to establish a kingdom, but this small lousy kingdom dared to boast shamelessly in front of him. Duan Yu patted Chestnut's large head and was too lazy to pay attention to this farce. Unexpectedly, the leader of the envoy group from the kingdom of Luo abruptly took a few steps forward and said seriously, "Your Honorable Majesty of Cangzhou, if you abandon us like this and refuse to meet with us face to face, you will certainly regret it immensely in the future. Although our kingdom of Luo grew on the prairie, we are very familiar with the situation of the 3 provinces. Your Majesty of Cangzhou, believe that this humble one and the kingdom of Luo will bring you a huge surprise." "Don't believe him, Your Majesty. He had only brought a fake face. If you see it, you'll be so angry that you won't even have time to wash your eyes." Wu Ruame, who was standing to the side, spoke with conviction. Duan Yu gave him a deep look. Now, he was actually a bit curious as to what kind of surprise this leader of the Doruo envoy group was going to present to him. "Your Majesty, please." The leader of the kingdom of Daluo's diplomatic mission extended his hand in an inviting gesture. He took the lead and followed Duan Yu into the study. Wu Ruame wanted to follow them in but was stopped by Xiao Kezi. He was so angry that he stomped his feet and shouted, "Xiao Kezi, get out of the way. Let me tell you, those people are definitely not good people." Little Kezi said with a straight face, "Miss Wu, if you continue to make such a ruckus, little Kezi has no choice but to get someone to shut your mouth and stop you from making a ruckus." Wu Ruame rolled her eyes in anger. However, due to Lil Kezi's threat, she did not dare to speak loudly. The leader of the envoy group entered the study and turned to close the door. He smiled at Duan Yu and bowed. "Your Honorable Majesty, I respectfully represent my kingdom of Daluo to come and discuss the matter of cooperation with you." Chapter 48-19. "This is our prairie's pearl, Miss Lily, the leader of the envoy group said proudly to Duan Yu before turning to give Lily a look. The woman in black removed the black veil covering her face and smiled at Duan Yu. Her fluttering eyelashes fluttered like butterfly wings. Her small oval face had a beautiful smile. Her gentleness carried a hint of demure serenity, and her quick-wittedness carried a hint of craftiness. At first glance, she looked a bit familiar. At second glance, Duan Yu's handsome face darkened. He knew why he found her familiar. This woman's face was 40% similar to Jojo's, especially that pair of eyes. No wonder Wu Ruame kept calling it a fake face earlier. Wu Ruame had seen Jojo's portrait before. Whether it was the facial features, the skin, or even the hairstyle, this fake face was infinitely close to Jojo's. Wu Ruame was right. This face really made him lose his appetite, and he wished for nothing more than to wash his eyes immediately. The leader of the envoy group had actually been paying attention to Duan Yu's expression the entire time. However, even though Duan Yu's mind was raging, he did not show it on his face, so he could not tell at all. Why didn't he show any expression? This person muttered in his mind, unable to grasp the attitude of this Zhangzhou emperor. Logically speaking, when he saw this face, apart from being shocked, he should be wild with joy. According to their Kingdom of Daluo's investigation of the rulers of the 3 provinces, this Zhangzhou emperor should be a strong competitor of the Divine Province's crown prince. Before he could finish his thought, he heard Duan Yu's cold voice. Why did you bring her here? The leader of the Kingdom of Daluo's envoy group couldn't help but shudder inwardly, thinking that this voice was truly bone-chilling. He hastily forced a smile and said, Your Majesty of Zhangzhou. Can we talk about cooperation? What do you want to cooperate on? Our common enemy is the Divine Province. The envoy continued, The Great Emperor of the Divine Prefecture wants us to offer tributes every year, but we haven't had a good harvest. Coupled with the zombies running around everywhere, we can't grow anything at all. We get to the point. Duan Yu didn't want to continue listening to his nonsense and coldly interrupted him. The country of Daluo is willing to help you become the true overlord of the upper 3 continents. Duan Yu stared sharply at the envoy before him, and he suddenly couldn't resist chuckling. Don't you think you're a bit ridiculous? It was just a small place, yet he kept saying that he would help him unify the 3 prefectures. Duan Yuezhen couldn't resist laughing loudly. The envoy said with a serious expression, Believe me, Your Majesty. The key lies in the little crown princess of the divine land. The envoy did not notice Duan Yu's gloomy expression and continued to blabber self-righteously, Lily's appearance can still be adjusted. She will look more and more like that little crown princess. At that time we'll turn the dragon into a phoenix and switch that little crown princess to your side. The more the envoy spoke, the more spirited he became, and he couldn't resist guffawing. Think about it. Wouldn't we control the lifeline of the divine province? Duan Yu also chuckled at him. His chuckle was deep and filled with an icy chill. He suddenly reached out to strangle that woman in black. Chapter 48-20. Before that envoy could react, he heard a crisp crack. The envoys all revealed astonishment as they looked at the expressionless Zhangzhou emperor in horror. Lily's neck drooped crookedly in Duan Yu's hand. Her beautiful face was still a bit bewildered, as though she couldn't figure out what was going on. He actually snapped Lily's neck without any explanation. This man didn't hesitate at all when he snapped Lily's neck, as though he was merely slaughtering a pig, a cow, a lamb, or a chicken. Looking at the Zhangzhou emperor's cold and indifferent gaze, the envoys all shuddered, and great terror flashed through their eyes. The leader of the envoy group forcefully suppressed his indignation and said coldly, If your Majesty doesn't want to cooperate with us, then there's no need to kill Lily. You can just say that you don't want to cooperate. Duan Yu glanced at him with a sneer and flung away the woman's corpse with a tilted head. He took out a handkerchief from his inner world and carefully wiped his hands. Duan Yu looked at them coldly without any intention of explaining. Take care of them all. As soon as he finished speaking, dozens of figures suddenly appeared from all directions and rushed toward those envoys to kill them all. The Kingdom of Luo's envoys were all shocked and hastily resisted in a fluster. However, there were too many hidden guards, and they simply couldn't deal with them. Before half an hour was up, the 100 hidden guards had killed all the envoys. Ing dragged the leader of the envoys in front of Duan Yu and kicked the back of his knee. The leader of the envoys yelped and fell to the ground with a face full of terror. His head was forcefully stepped on, and he prostrated himself on the ground. With his head being stepped on, he strenuously tried to raise his head to speak, and he stammered, You all. Tsangzhou Emperor, His Majesty, you. Ouch. Let him speak, Duan Yu coldly ordered. The secret guards immediately retracted their legs, bowed respectfully, and took a few steps back to stand still. The hidden guard leader raised his head while coughing up blood. His eyes stared fixedly at Duan Yu in front of him, and before he could say more than a few words, blood gushed out of his mouth. You guys. If you don't want to cooperate with us, there are many people who want to cooperate with us. There was a strange smile on the face of the head envoy. The smile on his face made one's hair stand on end. Duan Yu found him extremely displeasing to the eye, so he personally waved his hand, and a surge of sacred energy struck that person's head. Don't speak if you don't know how to speak human language, Duan Yu coldly retorted as he watched the envoy fall heavily to the ground. Clean this place up. Xiao Kuzi hurriedly ordered a group of trembling servants to come in and clean up the mess. However, Duan Yu suddenly turned his head and stopped in his tracks. He narrowed his eyes and coldly stared at the head envoy lying on the ground. He walked towards him step by step, approaching the head envoy's side. His cold gaze landed on the fake smile on his face. Duan Yu suddenly raised his leg and kicked. With a bang, the head envoy turned into a pile of fragments and disappeared before everyone's astonished eyes. Duan Yu's heart thumped heavily, and he immediately ordered sternly. Chapter 48-21. Gather all the men in the secret pavilion and seal off all the major passageways in Yen City. Search for this person with all our might. A clone. The one who came to negotiate with him was actually this head envoy's clone. And it wasn't until just now that he realized something was amiss. If you don't want to cooperate with us, there are many people who want to cooperate with us. The head envoy's words surfaced in Duan Yu's mind, and his expression abruptly changed. Probing, a blatant probing. They came here to probe him. If he was willing to cooperate with them, then they would hit it off right away. If he wasn't judging from the envoy's words, they would probably find someone else to cooperate with. A tiny kingdom of the prairie wanted to be an ant trying to shake a tree and make a move on the enormous divine province. Just as the heavenly providence was about to move, this tiny kingdom of Duoluo wanted to take advantage of the situation. Or was it trying to borrow the power of the east wind in a vain attempt to rise to the top? The heavens were about to change. Were all the snakes, insects, rats, and ants planning to collectively come out of their holes? Duan Yu's eyes were cold, and his fingers clenched slightly. He coldly ordered, "Go investigate. I want all the news regarding this kingdom of Duoluo in recent years. I want to know everything, no matter how big or small." Yes. Ing cupped his hands in salute and immediately flew out of the study with several people. Ah! A manservant who was cleaning up the floor was so scared that he scrambled back a few steps. Everyone turned to look at the sound. They saw Lily, who was lying on the floor, staring fixedly at them. Her mouth was agape, and her face was ghastly pale. Her forelimbs were all curled up deformed, and her entire body was curled up into a strip. Her appearance was very strange and frightening. Lil Cook glared fiercely at the manservant who was making a fuss. "Hurry and clean it up. Don't let them stay here and be an eyesore." The manservant nodded frantically and closed his eyes, not daring to look at Lily. He turned his face slightly to the side and shakily reached out to grab Lily's legs. Don't move. Duan Yu's pupils contracted as he suddenly shouted. The manservant subconsciously withdrew his hand, but in the next second, he felt an irreversible force pulling him away from Lily. After the huge force disappeared, the manservant fell on his back due to inertia. When he turned around, he saw that the stiff Lilial had actually moved. After a series of cracking sounds, Lily's limbs were twisted in an abnormal way, and she was lying on the ground in an extremely weird posture. What is this? Xiao Kuzi exclaimed, "Protect the Emperor, protect the Emperor." It's a corpse puppet. This woman has become a corpse puppet. Bang! The sound of the door being kicked was suddenly heard. The pitiful door of the study fell to the ground and landed heavily on Lily. Wu Ruame, who rushed in after hearing the news, held an ame piercer in each hand. Her eyes were wide open as she shouted, "Who dares to assassinate His Majesty? Bold thief, come out for me." Everyone was speechless. Where is he? Wu Ruame stepped on the door and furrowed her brows. Where is the assassin? Lil Kuzi speechlessly looked at this unreliable miss of the Wu family. He stretched out a finger and weakly pointed at Wu Ruame's feet. The latter looked down and saw a sinister head wriggling out from under the door she was stepping on. It was currently glaring at her with a murderous glint. Wu Ruame inwardly cursed, "Fuck." Her legs trembled in fright, and she quickly jumped down from the door. Chapter 48-22. This guy shouted in astonishment, "What the hell is this? Wasn't her looks too frightening? Isn't she the person who fought with you earlier, miss? That fake?" Wu Ruame was horrified and hastily retreated a few steps. My heavens! This transformation was too exaggerated. Duan Yu's expression was extremely unsightly. What the hell was this person from the kingdom of Luo doing? He actually vainly attempted to transform this kind of shady woman into Jojo's appearance. Were they stupid or was he stupid? This kind of transformation couldn't be concealed from anyone, let alone Mo Lien, right? That little stoic face number 101, who could consistently act like it from start to finish. When Duan Yu thought of this, he gave the hidden guard leader Yi a look, and the latter understood and stepped forward. He led a group of hidden guards and used a long spear to pin Lily, who was incessantly swimming around trying to attack people, to the ground. This Lily, was also incessantly shrieking. However, her hands and feet were entangled by the long spear, so she couldn't move, much less attack people. Red lights flashed in her eyes. It's not a zombie. Look carefully at her hands and feet. Duan Yu gestured for everyone to look at Lily's hands and feet. Everyone took a closer look and finally saw some clues. Lily's hands and feet were actually connected to a kind of lustrous and transparent silk thread that was as thin as a cicada. She suddenly moved because the owner of this silk thread was manipulating it. It's a puppet with a secret art. Duan Yu's handsome face froze as he stated icily, "It's not a zombie." As soon as he finished speaking, he raised his hand and threw a concealed weapon at the beam. A hunchbacked elder immediately jumped down from the beam with a cackle. "Brats, you have good taste. However, this old man can't continue playing with you." The hunchbacked elder's eyes glinted, and he swiftly threw out a pellet. A bang sound was heard, and a cloud of smoke started to diffuse out of the projectile. Then, it suddenly dissipated. The hunchbacked elder, who wanted to take advantage of this smoke to flee with Lily, looked over in bewilderment. A raven bone fan appeared in Duan Yu's hand. With a casual wave of his hand, the smoke that had yet to disperse was swept away. The man looked at him coldly. "You want to escape? Do you think you can escape from my hands?" The hunchbacked old man gritted his teeth. He took out a cigarette bomb from each of his 10 fingers and threw it to the ground. This time, the smoke bomb did not explode at all. Not to mention a cloud of smoke, not even a speck of smoke could be seen. If the hunchbacked old man could curse at this moment, he would definitely want to curse. Unfortunately, his body was heavily suppressed by a tyrannical pressure, and he could not utter a single syllable. It wasn't until the pressure was slightly removed that he felt his breathing become a little smoother, that he felt a sharp pain in his neck. He lowered his head and saw that his life had fallen into the hands of this young emperor. The man's pitch-black peach blossom eyes coldly stared at him, and a mocking smile curled on his lips. "Now, you still don't plan to tell me the truth?" I am a puppet master from the kingdom of Duoluo," the hunchbacked elder shouted in a panic. Don't kill me. I will speak, I can say anything. It's useless to kill me. In fact, there are many puppet masters like me in the kingdom of Duoluo. I also know that each of them have a lily in their hands. Chapter 48-23. What did it mean that everyone had a lily in their hands? These idiots from the state of Duoluo made a large batch of people who resembled Jojo. Duan Yu angrily gripped the neck of that puppet master from the state of Duoluo and demanded harshly, "Speak. How did you make this woman appear?" This person's facial features that degenerated after death were completely different from Jojo's. How did the so-called 40% resemblance come about when they were alive? We have a special medicinal liquid. After taking it, it can be infinitely similar to a person. Ridiculous. Duan Yu clearly did not believe this puppet master's nonsense. He tightened his grip and coldly said, "Do you think I will believe your words?" The puppet master's neck fell into Duan Yu's hands, and he nervously replied, his eyes brimming with fear. Your Majesty, I did not lie at all. Everything I said is true." The puppet master felt his breathing becoming irregular again. He hastily stabilized his breathing and confessed repeatedly, "Your Majesty, please believe me. What we puppet masters can do is secretly control these lily hairs one-on-one. We all have the talent to conceal our presence." This puppet master cried out in panic, "Lily hairs are indeed modified from the transformation medicinal liquid. This kind of directional transformation medicinal liquid is more effective than the transformation talismans drawn by talisman practitioners. It can be continuously modified and improved to target a certain person. The lily number 9 you see is the most low-grade modified lily This lowly one heard that lily number 0 is the true perfect product. Duan Yu's eyes were instantly filled with a bloody storm. He gripped that puppet master's neck and coldly asked, "When did you start doing this?" More than half a year ago, at the beginning of this year." The puppet master thought for a moment before suddenly exclaiming, "Oh, right around the time the young crown princess returned to the divine province." The young crown princess probably returned to the divine province at the beginning of February. And it was almost October now. A thought flashed through Duan Yu's mind. From the looks of it, this conspiracy wasn't targeting Xiao Qiao, but rather Mo Lian, that punk. Where's the laboratory? These people couldn't research the shape-shifting liquid in broad daylight. He must be hiding in some rat hole, doing this kind of shameful research all day long. The puppet master trembled. "Why, Your Majesty, I really don't know. Who was the person who just escaped?" Duan Yu didn't dwell on this question and continued to ask. That lord is our Doro country's 3 state teachers." The puppet master hurriedly said. "One of the 3 state teachers of Doro, Shintu Jing." Duan Yu raised a brow. "Actually, she's a very beautiful woman," the puppet master stammered. She's also used a transformation potion. She was an outstanding pharmacist. This shape-shifting liquid was researched with her as the core. Shintu Jing. Duan Yu coldly muttered this name in his mind. His handsome brows raised as he coldly asked, "Tell me everything you know." The puppet master was so anxious that his forehead was drenched in cold sweat. The problem was that he had already told him everything he knew. Chapter 48-24. He was only a peripheral member of the kingdom of Doruo. One only needed to look at the puppets he was controlling to know this. The one he was controlling was only Lily, number 9. And Lily, number 9 could not compare to Lily, number 0, whether it was her ability to modify, her personal ability, her cultivation, etc. It was not an exaggeration to say that Lily, number 9 was inferior to Lily, number 9. Duan Yu was so infuriated that his expression turned cold, and he involuntarily increased the force in his hand. It seems that it's better to search your soul. No, you can't search my soul. A trace of fear flashed through the puppet master's eyes. Every kingdom of Doruo has a soul-locking pill planted in our conscious. Once our souls are forcefully searched, it will trigger a self-explosion. At that time, not only will this one be finished, even you and the people around you will also be sent flying by the powerful explosion. When the group of little servants heard this, their faces all revealed a look of panic and fear, and they subconsciously took a few steps back. Duan Yu coolly looked at this puppeteer, as if he was assessing whether his words were true or false. Every word this one said is true. If I have deceived your majesty, this one is willing to accept the punishment of heaven's wrath, that person said fearfully, his face full of sincerity. Withdraw, all of you, Duan Yu ordered coldly. Xiao Kezi panicked and hastily stepped forward. He lowered his head and advised, "Your Majesty, you must not take the risk yourself. Your Majesty, please allow this subordinate to attempt a soul-searching to see if this old fellow is speaking the truth." A hidden guard walked out from behind Yi and solemnly cupped his hands. Why would Duan Yu be afraid of a mere soul-destroying body self-explosion? He shook his head and instructed the hidden guards, "All of you, withdraw." "Your Majesty." Duan Yu's piercingly cold gaze swept over everyone. Although Xiao Kuzi was flustered, he knew that even though His Majesty was young, his words had always been firm and uncompromising. Since he had already made up his mind, it meant that no one could sway him. Everyone retreated out of the room with unsightly expressions and looked at each other in dismay. Duan Yu's gaze landed on that puppet master. If you want to verify a person's words, it's best to personally examine them. The puppet master did not expect that the other party was still unwilling to let him go even after he had explained everything. Not to mention, he had already said that the soul-sealing pill had been planted in his head. Once his soul was searched, he would self-destruct. However, the young emperor in front of him was still unwilling to let him go. He was not willing to give him a way out. The puppet master's eyes instantly turned scarlet, and he wanted to fight Duan Yu with his life on the line. But could he? Being kicked by Duan Yu, he was like a weak little chick whose lifeline was being squeezed by the neck. He simply couldn't muster the slightest strength to resist. Duan Yu pressed down on his head and coldly glanced at him. "If you want to blame someone, blame your lord for insisting on provoking us. Yellow Springs, hell, don't look for the wrong person for revenge." Ah! The puppet master let out an extremely unpleasant and hoarse roar. Soon after, he felt as if his conscience had been torn open by someone. All his secrets were skimmed through in front of someone else's eyes. There was no movement at all. Duan Yu knitted his brows, and a trace of mockery curled up on his lips. As expected, this person's head did not contain the soul-sealing pill that he had mentioned. Chapter 48-25. After all, he was only a peripheral member of the state of Duoluo. It seemed that knowing so much was already his limit. Perhaps it was because he was smart enough and had secretly accumulated some information in his daily life. As for things that were too core, a peripheral member like him definitely wouldn't know. Duanyu tossed that person's corpse aside. Before he left the study, a wisp of Devil Emperor's fire silently ignited on the puppet master's body. In the blink of an eye, that person was completely burned, leaving not even a trace of residue. Who knew if there was some bizarre resurrection technique among the puppet mystic arts? Let's just burn you to ashes and let you properly resurrect. Duanyu stepped out of the study and looked up at the clear blue sky. Under this vast sky, how many filthy bastards were secretly breeding in the dark places where the sunlight couldn't reach? Xiao Kezi breathed a sigh of relief and hastily ran up. Your Majesty, that puppet master was deceiving us. Duanyu nodded. After all, death from a soul search was not something relaxing or pleasant. Presumably, that puppet master would rather have Duanyu slit his throat cleanly than die from a soul search. 2 hours later. Shadow, the hidden guard from the secret pavilion who went to investigate, scuttled into the study with several hidden guards. He respectfully cupped his hands at Duanyu. Your Majesty. Shadow walked up and bowed as he handed over a thick stack of documents. All the movements of the state of Duoluo in recent years, no matter how detailed, were all recorded in these documents. The study was quiet. After Xiao Kezi served Duanyu a cup of tea, he dutifully retreated to stand guard outside the door. Several secret guards stood silently in front of the desk, like blocks of wood. Only the rustling of papers could be heard in the study as Duanyu flipped through the documents. The hidden guards held their breaths as they waited for this young emperor to give his orders. In less than 15 minutes, Duanyu finished browsing through that stack of documents with a sullen expression. He heavily slapped the documents with his palm. An extremely low pressure pervaded the study. The hidden guards lowered their heads and didn't dare to speak. It was written very clearly in the documents. The state of Duoluo was established at the beginning of this year. Originally, it was just an insignificant tribe in the Pingjin Prairie between the Divine Land and Songzhou. Their scale was not even 1/100th of that of the barbarian tribes. But it was this small tribe that had established a country. Now, they actually came knocking on Duanyu's door and gleefully revealed Lily Er's plan to Duanyu. This kind of probing was too obvious. The state of Luo had made it clear that if Duanyu didn't cooperate with them, they would settle for the next best thing and find someone else to cooperate with. Such a disgusting way of doing things really made people panic in their hearts. Lily number 9-0 meant that there were at least 10 Lily Duanyu set down the stack of documents in his hand and pinched the space between his brows as he coldly said, pass on Zhen's verbal decree. Command the general of the Tiger Cavalry, Hu Gang, to lead his men to the Pingjin Prairie. Within half a month, I want to hear the news of the destruction of this country of Duoluo. Yes. Duanyu waved his hand to dismiss everyone. Let Yi in. The leader of the secret pavilion's hidden guards, Yi, appeared inside the study like a ghost and soundlessly arrived before Duanyu. Duanyu didn't even look up as he stared at the stack of documents with a frown. His finger tapped on one of the papers. This state of Duoluo is extremely mysterious. Chapter 48-26. That's all the information we could gather. It says that their territory is surrounded by man-eating black swamps. The swamps are crawling with man-eating insects and ants, so it will be difficult to pass through. Yi remained silent and habitually listened to His Majesty's words carefully. Flying is prohibited nearby, so not a single bird can pass through their array. In addition, once you step into the territory of the state of Duoluo, your divine senses will also be blocked by that array. Duan Yu looked up at Yi and ordered, take 1,000 people with you. Bring along the best formation masters, apothecaries, and superhumans. We want to hear good news from you within 10 days. Yes. Yi nodded heavily. Having Tiger Gang dispatch troops to attack the state of Duo Luo was only what they did on the surface. What Duan Yu truly wanted to get rid of were those damn Lily. He wanted Yi to lead a group of hidden guards to destroy the state of Duo Luo's laboratory. He wanted those messy Lily to all disappear from this world. What exactly did the state of Duo Luo want to do? After Duan Yu settled these matters, he summoned Xiao Kezi and said a few words before leaving the study to summon Chestnut. Xiao Kezi involuntarily sighed as he watched His Majesty's departing figure. His Majesty said that he would need at least half a month before returning. He just didn't know if His Majesty's wishes would be fulfilled. Miss Shui Yuan's prediction was so accurate. If we can't obtain the 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl, our entire clan will be annihilated. This is all your fault, all your fault. You are the eternal sinner of the Dragon Clan of Forgetfulness. It was you who caused the entire Dragon Clan of Forgetfulness to be annihilated. Arbor abruptly opened his eyes and exhaled deeply. He coldly stared at the fluttering bed canopy above him, his gaze abruptly chilling. Even ancestors said that it was the 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl that chose Mother on its own. Neither Mother nor she had done anything wrong. It was only the human heart and delusions that were at fault. Greed was hard to quench. When they worked so hard just to obtain a 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl, they wasted a lot of time and effort. They never thought of relying on their own abilities to advance, so they wanted to rely on luck. However, luck, this kind of illusory thing, was it something that everyone could have? A cluster of black flames emerged from the ferrule that had drilled out from under her sleeve. You want to use a wisp of your soul to enter my dream and cause trouble? Arbor said coldly, let the holy fire that burns everything in the world take you to hell. Prophet Tuesday, a slight fluctuation appeared in the air in front of him. In less than a second, the air in front of him calmed down again without the slightest change. Dong 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 dong. Omega Kotoku's voice could be heard from the cabin door. Jojo, what happened? In that instant, there seemed to be a hidden soul remembrance fluctuation. The strange thing was, it seemed to be gone now. Arbor's cold voice suddenly sounded. It's nothing. There was a little demon that wanted to enter my dream. It's been dealt with. That would require, I'm going to sleep, Arbor interrupted him coldly. Omega Kotoku stood outside the door and waited for a while. He heard that the aura in the cabin had calmed down and there was no sound at all. It seemed that Arbor was resting again. Omega Kotoku turned around and met his elder brother's smiling gaze. What happened? Eldest young master blinked and asked. Omega Kotoku left without a word. He was too lazy to even look at his elder brother. Chapter 48-27. Eldest young Sir Chin harumphed and rubbed his nose. He walked to Arbor's door with a grin and lightly knocked twice. Jojo. Are you alright? It was very quiet inside. Other than the faint sound of breathing, there wasn't any sound at all. Eldest young Sir Chin rubbed his chin and coughed lightly. Jojo is asleep. Don't disturb her. When the several attendants following behind him heard this, they all revealed indescribable expressions. It seemed like the ones who insisted on disturbing someone else's sleep were eldest young sir and second young sir, right? The next morning, Arbor got up refreshed and expressionlessly strolled to the deck of the ship, sitting down to eat breakfast as usual. Eldest young sir and second young sir had been waiting for a long time. When they saw her walk over with a stoic face, they couldn't help but exchange a glance. The little stoic didn't seem to be in any abnormal state. What exactly happened last night? The two scratched their cheeks as they pondered. However, a certain Sundara stoic refused to say, so they couldn't ask too much. Jojo, have some dessert. Eldest young Sir Chin grinned as he brought her a plate of exquisite pastries and brought it to her. He feigned indifference as he asked, "Did someone's divine scent sweep into your room last night?" Arbor expressionlessly took the plate of pastries and poked a small piece with a spoon. She said indifferently, "It was Prophet Tuesday." Everyone was involuntarily taken aback. A wisp of Prophet Tu's soul had yet to dissipate. There was nothing hard to say about him entering her dream to seek revenge. Moreover, if it weren't for the fact that they didn't handle it cleanly, how could Prophet Tu find an opportunity to seek revenge on her? The little stoic swept a disdainful glance at eldest young Sir. Eldest young Sir Chin immediately sat up straight and hastily said with a chuckle, "Yeah, I really didn't expect this old woman to have such godly means. Jojo, are you all right? If I wasn't, would I still be sitting here with you?" Arbor looked at eldest young Sir like he was looking at an idiot. Duguling and the others couldn't resist snickering silently. Eldest young master looked at Jojo with a stifled expression. Speechless, he pursed his lips and said, "Okay, okay. Of course, nothing will happen to Jojo. How could a mere 2 Xianzi hurt Chow Chow?" Arbor didn't say anything. This meant that she finally acknowledged one of eldest Chin's words. Everyone couldn't help but twitch their mouths speechlessly, inwardly thinking that this Tsundra little stoic was truly a headache. Looking at the journey, we should be able to reach the Pond Lotus Sacred Realm in 2 days. You said before that the Pond Lotus Sacred Land is guarded by the 5 great families of the River of Forgetfulness. Every aristocratic family has a key, and only by gathering these 5 keys can we open the passage to the depths of the Pond Lotus Sacred Realm. Arbor paused. You interrogated Prophet Tu and found out where the 5 keys are. Eldest young Sir Chin nodded with a smile. It's about time. We've already sent our men to the various patrician families to search. Let's go there first, and the key will be delivered later. This way, we won't delay the opening of the Pond Lotus Sacred Realm. Arbor was silent. Among the 5 great patrician families in the Sea of Forgetfulness, the Long clan had dug its own grave, and the Duo clan was more or less dead in name only. The remaining 3 patrician families were definitely trembling with fear. If they didn't want to cause trouble, they definitely wouldn't clash with the Qin estate of the Divine Province. Thus, it really wasn't difficult to obtain those 5 keys at all. Arbor silently ate the pastries and millet porridge. Although she didn't say anything, her mind was constantly pondering. Previously, little Tai Sui wanted to bring her to the Pond Lotus Sacred Realm. Chapter 48-28. Now that the 2 of them were separated, logically speaking, would little Tai Sui be waiting for her at the entrance of the Pool Lotus Sacred Realm? That was extremely likely. That was why the poison-tailed butterflies she sent out to search for him weren't able to find him in the nearby waters. The reason was that little Tai Sui had already gone far. Arbor made a decision in her mind. She would follow the Qin estate's people to the Pool Lotus Sacred Realm first. She did feel a bit uncomfortable, but this was already the best solution in the current situation where her divine sense had yet to recover. Once they entered the mystic realm, who knew if they would get separated in such a large mystic realm? Humph. At that time, she would take the opportunity to stroll around casually. Who knew if they would meet again in such a large mystic realm? Sir Jojo's eyes flickered. Since he had already made up his mind, his heart that had been on edge for the past few days relaxed slightly. In any case, they were going to the Pool Lotus Sacred Realm to find that wisp of Lien's soul. Since they were already here, they might as well let nature take its course. Young sir, young sir. A servant of the Qin estate ran over with a strange expression on his face. He glanced at them hesitantly, as if he wanted to say something. Eldest young Sir Qin was baffled, and he swept that person a glance. If you have something to say, just say it. Why are you hemming and hawing? They're drifting back again. The boatman had a strange expression on his face as he called out. Fifth young Sir Qin was walking over with a plate of freshly made 1,000-layer pastry, and he couldn't help but say good-naturedly, Kai, speak properly. What floated back again? The servant called Kai gestured with his hands and feet and said to the Qin estate's silent young masters with knitted brows, It's those people that eldest young sir ordered us to throw down a few days ago after we fished them up. They floated back again. As the servant spoke, he was beaming with joy. It seemed that he also found this matter extremely hilarious. Eldest young sir clearly didn't remember this matter, and he looked at that person called Kai in bewilderment. What are you talking about? What people floated back? Fifth young Sir Qin twitched his mouth. His memory was evidently better than his eldest brother's. Placing the 1,000-layer pastry in front of the little stoic, the fifth young sir coughed lightly and said, Eldest brother, it should be those people from the Wangchuan duo clan. I saw them on the surface of the sea earlier, so I sent people to fish them up. Without another word, Big Brother ordered the servants to throw them down. Wangchuan duo clan. Eldest young Sir Qin rubbed his chin. Suddenly, he had a flash of inspiration and exclaimed, Oh! I remember now, it's that group of people who were thrown into the sea by the little stoic and had their spiritual senses and cultivation sealed, unlucky bastard. The little stoic glanced askew at the eldest young sir and put on an aloof face. Who are you? Why was she so bored as to throw him into the water? She stood up and walked towards the railing. He raised his head and looked into the distance. He saw a dozen or so men and women on the surface of the sea. Some of them were lying on wooden planks, while others had activated their defensive barriers. As they drifted, they kept waving and calling for help. The eldest young master quickly walked over and looked from afar. Sure enough, he saw the young miss of the Wang Chuan duo clan, Duo Shanmei. She was hugging a large wooden board and sitting alone on it. She kept waving her hands in the direction of the ship while shouting something. My goodness, these people from the Forgetful River duo clan still haven't recovered their spiritual senses and cultivation base. Ling Gu couldn't help but exclaim. The fifth young sir shook his head. They should have recovered already. Arbor expressionlessly stuffed a piece of 1,000-layer pastry into his mouth before turning to leave. Chapter 48-29. She also recognized that these people were the ones who came to the snowy island to ask her for Duo Shanming. Duo Shanming's master, Wang Axian, brought this group of juniors here to cause trouble. This Wang Axian also launched a mental attack on her earlier. That's right, this person died after Duan Yu burned his conscience with the Devil Emperor's flame. The little stoic's memory was pretty good, so she recalled everything after a bit of thought. She recognized that Miss Duo. She originally had short hair and a delicate and pretty small face, but after many days of sea breeze and rolling waves, her face was now completely black. Her hair also hadn't been washed for who knew how many days as it drooped on top of her head. However, what did these people's misfortune have to do with her? Seeing the little stoic turn around and leave the railing with a clearly displeased expression, the eldest young sir thought, fortunately, this young sir was smart and quick-witted, ordering people to throw them off the boat first. Otherwise, the little stoic would definitely disdain him as well. That would be a loss that outweighed the gains. This girl didn't like him very much to begin with, so he didn't want her to dislike him even more. There seems to be a lot more people inside, Ling Gut exclaimed as she pointed at the people on the sea. Why are there 2 children inside? I remember that the Wangchuan duo clan didn't have children in the past. Ling Gu was halfway through her sentence when she saw the little stoic turn back. She carefully sized up the sea, and her delicate brows furrowed slightly. Ling Gu was right. There seemed to be many people she hadn't seen before mixed in with the Wangchuan duo clan. There were 12 to 20 men and women of all ages, and each of their faces revealed a bewildered expression. Let's salvage them first, Xiao Mu said with a cold expression. Eldest young Sir Qin said with a grin, Jojo, don't you hate the Wangchuan duo clan? She did hate the Wangchuan duo clan who bared their fangs and brandished their claws, but there seemed to be many commoners among them. She couldn't just leave those people in the lurch for the sake of the monk. The servant called Afu organized a group of servants and went up to fish out the people in the water. At this time, Duo Shanmei also clearly saw who the other party was. Her gaze landed on eldest Qin, and her expression instantly turned unsightly. Wasn't this the young master who had thrown them into the sea again not long ago? Enemies were truly bound to meet on a narrow road. They didn't know if he would once again turn hostile, and mercilessly Duo Shanmei was hauled onto the ship with a rope and landed on the deck with a plop. She turned around and saw the little stoic's face that left a deep impression on her. Her face immediately darkened and she subconsciously took a step back. A young man from the duo clan who jumped up from behind her could not help but cry out, "Why are you here? Why did he run into this little fiend again?" The young man's face showed a trace of horror. He took a few steps back and pointed at Arbor. What do you want to do?" Arbor couldn't be bothered with them. His gaze fell on the few ordinary people who were dragged up. Judging from their appearance, they seemed to be people from some merchant ship. A middle-aged man who looked like a shopkeeper was protecting a girl who was completely drenched and wrapped in a blanket. He stared at them with vigilant eyes. That girl was also tightly holding the hand of a 7 to 8-year-old child who was dressed in brocade clothes and had a fair complexion, rosy lips, and white teeth. Eldest young Sir Qin gave a look, and several servants immediately came forward with clean clothes and handkerchiefs. Chapter 48:30. Your clothes are all wet. Please come with us to change. Several people who looked like shop assistants thanked them profusely. A young woman even led her child forward and bowed gratefully to eldest Qin and company. Only then did she follow the servants into the passenger cabin to change. "Miss, why don't you go in and change as well?" The middle-aged man whispered to the delicate and pretty girl who was wrapped in a blanket. The girl glanced warily at eldest young Sir Qin and company before her gaze landed on Arbor. In the end, she shook her head slightly. "Be careful, Uncle Gu." She could tell that these young masters and misses on the ship were not easy to deal with. Her father had already been eaten by the corpse fish at sea, so she could only rely on herself now. Soon, the commoners who had gone in to change their clothes walked out again and thanked eldest young Sir Qin and company again. "Everyone, can you tell us what happened?" Eldest young Sir Qin asked with a grin. "Young sir, our ship encountered such a huge man-eating shark." That miss said that this wasn't an ordinary man-eating shark. A woman holding a child pointed at Duo Shanmei and said, "Miss said that this was a huge. The young woman forgot her words and racked her brains, but she couldn't recall what Duo Shanmei had said. Huge man-eating shark. Naturally, Duo Shanmei did not need anyone to provide her with clothes. She had followed the servant into the inner cabin and retrieved her clothes from the inner world. Now that she had changed into clean clothes, she felt much better all over. Therefore, she was in the mood to chat with others. "Oh, right. It's this huge man-eating shark. The young woman grasped her son's hand in horror and said hastily, when it charged over, we felt the entire ship shake. It was too scary. It's worthy of being the overlord of the ocean. Didn't your ship encounter it? Eldest young Sir Chin shook his head and said with a smile, it seems that we were rather lucky. The man-eating shark is so powerful. How did you escape? Arbor asked coldly. The girl wrapped in the blanket couldn't help but turn pale. You're suspecting us. Doubt? The young woman's face was filled with confusion. She quickly waved her hand and said, no, we didn't escape. At that time, our boat was capsized by a shark. We had no choice but to fall into the water. At first, I thought that Kuei and I were definitely going to die. Who knew that it would be so coincidental? Before the carcass shark could reach us, we were hit by a stream of water. At that time, many people were taken out, including me and my son. The woman recalled as she spoke. Sigh, it was so dangerous. Xiaomu glanced at her and saw that woman making a fuss and gesticulating with her hands in an extremely pretentious manner. Water flow. Yes, it was an extremely hot current. Many people who weren't slapped away were trapped in the current. If they weren't eaten by the huge wave of corpse fish below, then they would be cooked into shrimp. An old man nodded and confirmed the truth of the woman's words. I didn't expect this trip to be so dangerous. Originally, I just wanted to take the Daiyuan merchant ship, but I didn't expect that. Chapter 48-31. That elderly man heaved a long sigh. His eyes appeared somewhat downcast, as if he was recalling some of his deceased companions. He recalled that the old owner of the Daiyuan merchant ship had also died in this unexpected calamity. The elderly man couldn't help but sigh, and he turned to look at the girl wrapped in the blanket. Miss Fong, my condolences. That's right, Miss Fong. The dead can't be brought back to life, so you mustn't be too grieved. The young woman also grumbled. She then looked at the girl wrapped in the blanket and said, Miss Fong, the weather is turning cold now. It's uncomfortable for you to be soaking wet like this. How about I bring you over to change your clothes? Miss Fong and her brother were the same as them. They were ordinary people and didn't have their own inner world. This blanket was given to Miss Duo by a male cultivator beside her. He kindly lent her a blanket to wrap herself in after seeing that she was drenched from head to toe and didn't look too good with all her curves exposed. Miss Fong tightly grasped her brother's small hand. When she heard the boy sneeze twice, her gaze finally softened. She nodded and said to the woman, Thank you for your trouble, eldest sister-in-law Yang. Eldest sister-in-law Yang smiled and said, Aye. She turned around and said a few words to a boy servant on the ship before asking him to lead the way and accompany Miss Fong and her brother to change their clothes. Arbor glanced at them and said, I'm sleepy. During this period of time, she needed to recover her divine sense as soon as possible. After taking some pills, sleeping or meditating was the best way to digest the energy. Eldest young Sir Chin smiled at her. All right. Then you go rest first. I'll make arrangements for these people. Arbor ignored him and grumbled in her mind, if he doesn't make arrangements for these people, do I have to make arrangements for them? The little fellow was used to being a hands-off shopkeeper. She returned to her room to rest and didn't care where eldest young Sir Chin had arranged for those people outside. By the time she finished taking the suppressing beard pill and meditated for a while and opened her eyes, the entire morning had already passed. It was time for a pleasant lunch again. Although the little stoic didn't say anything, her feet had already involuntarily walked towards the deck. After interacting with her for so long, the young sirs of the Qin estate all knew of this little stoic's strange habits. Anyway, no matter what, the little fellow would always appear on the deck every time it was mealtime for 3 meals a day. When the little stoic walked onto the deck, she raised her hand to rub her lower abdomen and inwardly said, "Mom is going to eat. Baby, absorb it well." She had just walked to the deck when she heard a resentful voice. "How can you arrange for Miss to live with young Deseo and the others? Young master, you can't live with those fellows either. At the very least, you should arrange a room for the 2 of them." Ling Gu, who was in the middle of a conversation, could not help but laugh out of anger. She immediately spoke rudely, "We're not an inn and we're not charging you. There are only 2 rooms, one for the men and one for the women. If you don't like this, you can get off the boat by yourself." These people were really laughable. They were really troublesome. When they boarded the boat, they assumed that they were people with ulterior motives. At first, Miss Fong refused to follow the servants to change her clothes. Later on, she was so wet that she couldn't stand it anymore, so she followed the young woman, Yang de Sao, to change into clean clothes. When he was changing his clothes, his expression was very ugly. His face was full of disdain for the coarse clothes of the servants. Now that she had arranged a place for them to rest, trouble came again. Did they really think the whole world was their parents? You were already fished out, yet you still didn't know how to stop. Chapter 48-32. When Steward Gu of the Dayuan merchant ship heard Ling Ji's words, he quickly smoothed things over with a bitter smile. "It's not that I don't know what's good for me. There's a reason for this. Miss Fong's brother is afraid of coming into contact with strangers and is not suitable to stay with us men. Steward, please arrange another room. It's fine even if it's smaller. Just let the 2 of them live together." "No." Ling Gu waved her hand impatiently. "There are no extra rooms." Duo Shanmei rolled her eyes and thought to herself, it would be strange if there are no rooms. The 3 cabins to the left of the little crown princess are all empty. The little crown princess was staying on the 3rd floor of the ship. There were a total of 4 rooms above. She sneaked over to take a look and saw that they were all empty. Xiao Mu expressionlessly walked past the 2 people and went to sit at the table to wait for food to be eaten. As for that sister-in-law Yang, her son Kuei, and a few of the Dayuan merchant ship staff, they were already sitting at a small table at the side. When they heard that the owner of this ship had invited them over for a meal, they were very grateful. After all, they were penniless at the moment and had nothing they wanted. The owner was too kind to be willing to do them a favor and arrange food and lodging for them after saving them. Sister-in-law Yang and her son, 2 other elders, and a few young people were all passengers of the Dayuan merchant ship. They had interacted with Miss Fong, Steward Gu, and the others for a long time and had formed some friendships. Seeing that Steward Gu was quarreling with the owner's manservant, sister-in-law Yang, who was keen on meddling in other people's business, whispered to a staff member, "Why is Steward Gu quarreling with that young man? This isn't good. Hurry up and call him over." Duo Shanmei brought a few surviving forgetful Chuan Duo clan cultivators and sat at the table at the side. When she heard that, she couldn't help but say coldly, "What else can they quarrel about? Isn't it just a matter of accommodation? Arranging for 7 or 8 of us to stay in one room. How can we stay in such a cramped place?" Sister-in-law Yang hurriedly waved her hand and said, "You can't say that. We should be endlessly grateful that someone saved us. The owner has already done his best to arrange food and lodging for us. How can you be so picky? Besides, I've seen the bunk. It's not too crowded. The beds are all clean." The 2 or 3 women beside eldest sister-in-law Yang nodded in agreement. They didn't have any objections. To be able to escape death, have a roof over their heads, and live comfortably with food and shelter was already good enough. Arbor was sitting a little further away from them, but the deck was only so big that she could hear what they were saying. Fifth young Master Cheen walked to her side while carrying a plate of braised fish. Don't mind them, let eldest brother deal with these people. Hurry up and eat, then rest early. Arbor's little hand that was holding the fish paused slightly. She thought indignantly, do I look like someone who sleeps after eating? For the past few days, she had given off such a feeling. After he finished eating, he went back to his room to sleep. After he had slept enough, he came out to continue eating. She didn't like to talk to people, and she didn't like to talk either. Sometimes, in order to make her talk, you would talk a lot, but she would look at you as if you were an idiot. You wouldn't be able to continue at all, and the conversation would come to an abrupt end. At this speed, we'll reach the vicinity of the Pond Lotus Sacred Land by tomorrow night. Do you want to enter that mystic realm together? The little stoic didn't bat an eyelid and feigned indifference. Up to you. Then how about you stay on this ship? The little emperor said impatiently, we'll talk about it when the time comes. Seeing her displeasure, the fifth young master hastily nodded. Okay. 10:00. Chapter 48-33. Humph, of course she had to enter the mystic realm. If she didn't enter the mystic realm, how could she find Lien's soul and break away from them as soon as possible? The fifth young master smiled bashfully at her. I won't be able to take an afternoon nap in the mystic realm. Arbor. Do I look like someone who likes to nap so much? When the fifth young master saw her casting a sidelong glance at him, he hastily nodded sensibly and said, Then we'll see when the time comes. Jojo, eat more. Is this celery stir-fried not delicious? The little emperor replied expressionlessly, I don't like vegetables. When eldest young Master Cheen walked over, he heard his fifth brother stuttering to the little stoic, but, this green vegetable, you still have to eat a bit. The little stoic was impatient. Why are you so long-winded? She paused and then said with a humph, bring it over. The fifth young master hastily brought the plate over. The eldest young master couldn't resist wanting to laugh and walked over to greet her. Stoic. The little stoic, bah, you're the stoic, your whole family is stoic. What do you plan to do with those people? She pretended to ask carelessly, and her chopsticks moved to the fish fillet on the side. Eldest young Master Cheen was a bit amused. He picked up a clean pair of chopsticks and tilted his head to look at her. Stoic, if you're worried about them, then say it directly. If you don't say it, how will they know your intentions, right? What do I have to worry about? The little crown princess stuck out her small head and humphed nonchalantly. The eldest young master pursed his lips and smiled. Fine. You're not worried, but I'm worried, all right. Humph. When we reach the Pond Lotus Sacred Realm tomorrow, we'll definitely have to stay there for a while. The eldest young master said, at that time, we'll have the ship send them to their destination and then come back to pick us up. After hearing the eldest young master's plan, the little stoic didn't utter another word. Eldest young Master Cheen knew that she was reassured, so he smiled and didn't expose her. He used his chopsticks to pick up a piece of braised fish and slowly put it into his mouth, praising in passing, Fifth brother, your culinary skills are getting better and better. Fifth young Master Cheen was a bit embarrassed from the praise, and he hastily waved his hand. Just make do with it. Arbor looked at the fifth young master curiously. You cooked it. The 5 young masters hurriedly nodded. The little emperor said proudly. It was very rare for him to praise her. It's indeed not bad. Fifth young master Chin's pair of fawn-like eyes suddenly brightened. Duo Shanmei sat at the dining table with a complicated expression. She held a white steamed bun in her hand and chewed without tasting the food. Her eyes would occasionally glance at the nearby little stoic. Compared to the crude food on their table, the little stoic's table had chicken, duck, fish, and meat, as well as pastries and soup. It was simply too sumptuous. She chewed on the steamed bun like she was chewing wax. She glanced at the 3 side dishes on the table with disdain: pickled vegetables, shredded radish, and a small plate of soybeans. Speaking of which, these days were really unlucky for her. Ever since they were thrown into the sea by the little stoic on that deserted island and had their spiritual senses and cultivation sealed, their successive encounters were simply indescribable. When they were truly unlucky, they could even stuff their teeth with cold water. Not only was their inner worlds plundered clean by that scoundrel stoic, but they would also encounter several corpse fish from time to time as they floated on the surface of the sea in fear and trepidation. Fortunately, even though they had lost their cultivation, they still had some defensive artifacts on them. They relied on these items to barely survive. Chapter 48-34. She now knew that the owner of this ship was the Qin estate's young master. Previously, when they were rescued and thrown into the water by the eldest young master, she felt that this matter was definitely related to that expressionless face. Without cultivation and spiritual senses, it was actually extremely dangerous to drift on the sea for a few days. Fortunately, they were lucky and didn't encounter a large group of zombie fish. Otherwise it would be difficult for the Wangshuan duo family to even protect the remaining 10 survivors. After drifting in fear and trepidation for several days, they finally encountered the Diyuan merchant ship and were rescued. They didn't expect to encounter a crazy attack from a giant zombie shark the next day. It wasn't entirely true to say that Sheik Duo Shanmei was extremely unlucky. At least she was still alive now. Even if she was lucky, she couldn't have been allowed to drift on the sea for so many miserable days and still be eating salted vegetables and steamed buns. "Hey, why are you making so much noise?" A kind voice came from behind Ling Gu. Ling Gu was annoyed by the pestering steward Gu and her expression turned ugly. When she heard his voice, she turned her head and looked over together with steward Gu. What entered her sight was a pot-bellied old man in his 60s with a smile like a Maitreya. His sparse forehead was smooth, and he wore a yuanbao hat. When he walked, his big belly bounced up and down, making him look extremely kind. Ling Gu hurriedly bowed and respectfully called out, "Grandfather Luo." "Ling Gu, how can you be so rude to a guest?" The old man smiled kindly and turned to the red-faced Gu Dazhong. "This guest, I'm really sorry. What did I do that made you dissatisfied?" When the old man said this, Gu Dazhong rubbed his hands uneasily. After all, the other party saved them first. Now that he was arguing with the host for so long because of the accommodation, it wasn't very kind of him. However, for the sake of his young mistress and young master, he had to bite the bullet and be this annoying person. Gu Dazhong told the old steward about the young master's situation. Elder Luo smiled and nodded. "Then, how about this? There's a small compartment next to the bunk. Usually, it's used to store the servants' clothes and sundries. I'll order people to clean up this small room for young mistress and young master to live in. Is that okay?" Gu Dazhong heaved a sigh of relief and nodded gratefully. "Thank you for your trouble, old steward." Sure. Elder Luo replied with a smile. Omega Kotoku walked down the stairs and glanced at the people standing at the staircase. "Elder Luo, what's the matter?" "It's fine, second young master. This old servant can arrange everything here," Elder Luo said with a smile. When second young Master Qin heard this, he nodded apathetically and walked past them. Miss Fong, who had been standing by the side from the beginning to the end and waiting for Steward Gu to finish negotiating with the other party, held her younger brother's small hand tightly. Only then did he walk forward and whisper to Steward Gu, "Uncle Gu, what did they say?" She and her younger brother were ordinary people, and their hearing was average. From such a distance, she only knew that Uncle Gu had been talking to someone with an excited expression, but she did not know what they were talking about. Lieutenant General Gu repeated Elder Luo's words to the young lady. Miss Fong's face showed some disdain. "Uncle Gu, you want us to stay in the storage room where the servants store their clothes and hats?" Gu Dazhong's face also showed that he was in a difficult position. "Young mistress, it's been hard on you and young master. It might take a few days. It'll be fine when we arrive." Chapter 48-35. Miss Fong also knew that it was impossible for her to negotiate with the owner at this time, otherwise, she would be even more detestable. The girl smiled awkwardly and said softly, "No, it's not grievance. This is the only way for us to go through such an emergency." Gu Dazhong nodded and heaved a sigh of relief. If Miss asked him to negotiate with the owner about changing rooms, he was afraid that he would really annoy the other party and throw them off the boat. People have no choice but to lower their heads when they are under someone else's roof. Miss Fong sighed sadly, and her gaze seemed to glance in Duo Shanmei's direction. "Miss, why don't you go and eat some steamed buns?" Gu Dazhong hurriedly said, "Let's go over quickly and eat something first. Miss and young master will have to suffer for this period of time. When we reach to Jubilee City and contact the shopkeeper of the branch, you and young master will not have to suffer anymore." Although he said that, Gu Dazhong himself knew that this matter was still a little uncertain. Their master had died on the way, and the entire Fong clan had lost their backbone. Just this young master and young miss who knew nothing about business and did not understand the ways of the world, wanting to take over the branch into Jubilee City. This matter was still a little uncertain. Miss Fong wiped the tears from the corner of her eyes and held her brother's hand, saying, "Uncle Gu, why is my life so hard?" Gu Dazhong could not help but sigh when he heard that. "Miss, let's not talk about this first. Look, there are not many steamed buns left on the table. Let's hurry over and get a few." When they walked over, they realized that the steamed buns on the table were already gone, and there were only 1 or 2 soybeans and 2 or 3 salted vegetables left on the side dishes. Gu Dazhong was stunned. When they looked over from afar, there were still some leftover food on the table. How could it be that in just a few steps there was nothing left? Miss Fong looked at the mess on the table and thought about her wealthy life back home. She sighed even more sadly. "Forget it, Uncle Gu, let's go back to our room first." A Wang Chuan duo clansman at the table smiled awkwardly at Gu Dazhong. He coughed and took out 2 steamed buns from his inner world. "Shopkeeper Gu, take this and eat it." Miss Fong glanced at the cultivators with a face full of resentment. She bit her lip and pulled her brother away. As cultivators, if they couldn't eat, they could store some food for themselves. It was all her fault for not being able to cultivate. She didn't even have 1 or 2 inner worlds. It was impossible for her to store food like others. Seeing Miss Fong leave with tears in her eyes, the practitioners felt even more embarrassed. They hurriedly stood up and said uneasily, Fong, I saw that no one wanted to eat. Only then did we put away the remaining food." Yes, so as not to waste it. I didn't expect that Miss Fong and her brother haven't eaten yet." The other party coughed awkwardly. Miss Fong's sorrowful and pitiful expression just now was too pitiful. Duo Shanmei was speechless. This Miss Fong shouldn't have left crying over a steamed bun, right? She reflexively glanced at the little stoic again. The stoic face was very perceptive and immediately shot a glance at him, meeting his gaze head-on. Duo Shanmei's heart skipped a beat, and her eyes narrowed slightly. These past few days, she didn't dare to appear in front of the little girl. After all, the Wang Chuan duo clan and the little girl still had unresolved grievances and grudges. Chapter 48-36. There was no guarantee that the little stoic would remember something and want to settle accounts with her when the time came. Just like now, when she was being stared at by the girl's cold eyes, Duo Shanmei felt a trace of uneasiness from the bottom of her heart. Some thoughts flashed through his mind. For example, the Forgotten River duo clan had joined forces with the Dragon clan to encircle the little girl before. Another example was her family's duo Shanming. Right now, he seemed to still be imprisoned on a deserted island by the little stoic, and his whereabouts were unknown. Xiao Mu merely swept an apathetic glance at Duo Shanmei before retracting her gaze. While sleeping in the Datong bunk at night, Duo Shanmei kept recalling the little stoic's cold, electrifying gaze. She repeatedly wondered if this stoic would come to seek revenge on her in the middle of the night. It was unknown when it had started to rain outside. The raindrops gradually became heavier, and when they fell on the window lattice, it made a pitter-patter sound. This Duo Shanmei had always been suspicious and felt that there was a shadow floating by outside the window. She grabbed a random sword and hugged it close to her chest. Just like that, she spent most of the night in a daze. Just as he was about to fall asleep, he suddenly felt the hull of the boat shake. Duo Shanmei grabbed her sword warily and jumped up, yelling, "Who is it?" Eldest sister-in-law Yang was sleeping beside her. After being yelled at by Duo Shanmei, she jolted awake and sat up straight. She called out sleepily, "What's going on?" Dong dong dong. When the maid knocked on the door, Arbor had already dressed up and got out of bed. In fact, she was sleeping with her clothes on, so she didn't need to dress up. Two maids hurriedly came in and said, "Miss Chiao, please get ready. We might have to change ships. It's raining cats and dogs outside. I'm afraid the ship won't be able to hold on for much longer." This boat was a 3-story pleasure boat. Usually, it would be fine to sit on it and play with the wind and rain, but now that it was raining in the middle of the night, it couldn't withstand the beating of the rain. Arbor replied with an "oh" and didn't say anything else. She activated her eggshell shield to block the wind and rain and followed the two maids to the deck. From afar, she could see that Duo Shanmei, sister-in-law Yang, and the others were also called to the deck by the steward. There was no shelter on the deck, and most of the people were exposed to the wind and rain. When Miss Fong glanced at the little stoic, a faint emotion flashed through her eyes. She sighed sadly. Is this the difference between ordinary people and practitioners? Duo Shanmei couldn't take it anymore and rolled her eyes. Actually, as long as you have the money, you can also buy this defensive spiritual weapon. But without spiritual energy, how can I open the defensive barrier? Miss Fong sighed again. She picked up her handkerchief and wiped her face. It was unknown whether she was wiping rainwater or tears. Duo Shanmei rolled her eyes again. Can you stop being so sad? It wasn't that the black market didn't have defensive spiritual weapons that didn't require spiritual power. It's just that the price is a little higher. What's more, this is not the time. Hurry up and keep up. Let's save our lives first. He was still in the mood to wallow in melancholy. Who knew what would happen later? When Duo Shanmei saw the little girl, she secretly observed her expression. The little stoic looked refreshed and unperturbed. When Duo Shanmei saw that expression, she felt a bit of a headache, and her mind whirled rapidly. So it turned out that she had been tormenting herself for most of the night, paranoid that the stoic would come back to kill her. While she didn't dare to sleep all this time, this fellow probably slept to her heart's content, right? Crash. A high wave hit them head-on. The eldest young sir's figure appeared beside the little stoic like a ghost. He raised his hand to block and turned his head to say seriously, "Change boats." Chapter 48-37. The little crown princess uttered an "oh" again and glanced at him. She saw that this guy didn't activate his defensive spiritual weapon, but not a single drop of rain touched him. Upon closer inspection, she saw that any rainwater that touched his body was evaporated by a faint white mist. Upon seeing this, the little stoic harumphed. He was showing off his cultivation realm. If Sir Jojo advanced to the transcendent divine realm, he could walk in the rain every day without getting a drop of rain on him. Eldest young Sir Chin inexplicably sensed that the little girl's mood had turned sour again, and she glared fiercely at him with her beautiful eyes. How baffling! How had he offended this little emperor? "Hurry and follow me." The eldest young sir wanted to pull her but discovered that there was nowhere to reach. The little stoic was completely encased in a round eggshell, so there was really no way to pull her. The eldest young sir secretly twitched his mouth before saying, "Xiao Bao, hurry and follow me. You go first." At this time, that old steward Luo of Ford Town also hastily ran over and rushed to eldest young Sir Chin in the rain. He said anxiously, "Young sir, why are you still here? Hurry and leave. There are many corpse fish gathered under the ship, and water has already entered the lower cabin." When everyone heard that the school of corpse fish had arrived, their eyes burned with anxiety, and the children even started crying out of fear. Sister-in-law Yang hastily embraced her son and covered his mouth, saying, "Don't be scared, don't be scared. Child, we will be able to leave this place very soon." Arbor turned to glance at the mother and son before saying to eldest young Sir Chin with knitted brows, "Hurry and leave. Where are the other ships? Let them leave together." Okay. Eldest young Sir Chin nodded helplessly and sent a look to the boy servants beside him. Someone then scrambled forward to help the women pick up the children and beckoned for them to quickly follow. At this time, the ship was already swaying left and right in the wind and rain, seemingly on the verge of collapsing. Several hundred feet away, a large black ship completely covered in iron armor had silently stopped in the sea at some point in time. Seawater surged up and down in all directions, and a gust of wind blew Xiao Mu's tied-up long hair into disarray. His moon-white clothes fluttered in the wind in the dark night. Omega Kotoku jumped off the opposite ship and jumped onto the deck. He frowned and stared at Arbor. "Let's go. What are you waiting for?" He wanted to go forward and grab her, but just like eldest young master, he realized that there was no place for him to grab her. He looked at her speechlessly. "Can you go there by yourself?" Arbor threw him a cold look. "Bah, just this bit of distance, can this lord be stumped? Did he think she was a good-for-nothing?" Ignoring them, Arbor rose into the air on its own. Then, everyone saw this guy wrapped in a transparent cover, rolling in the air and rolling over. Eldest young Sir Chin twitched his mouth and silently shut his mouth. Why did he feel that the little stoic was a little comical? Arbor landed gracefully on the opposite boat. The fifth young master hurriedly ran over with a large towel in his hand. In the end, he realized that the little girl didn't need to wipe it at all. Her eggshell defensive barrier that could block the wind and rain was really unique. Pfft, Duguling couldn't resist laughing. When he saw the little stoic's gaze sweep over, he hastily shut his mouth and coughed lightly. "Ah, is everyone all right?" "Your ship is too lousy," the little stoic said indignantly. "Wasn't it funny to have to move the ship in the middle of the night?" You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.